Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Kent City Council Committee of the Whole meeting. Today is Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021. This is a remote meeting due to the COVID-19 health and safety requirements put in order by the governor. So I want to welcome anyone that is joining us today on Kent TV 21, the Facebook City of Kent channel, the YouTube Kent 21 channel, and then anyone that is dialing in and joining us today. So welcome. We will get started with our agenda, and that is item number 1. Kim, will you please call the roll?
Thank you.
I'm sorry, item number 2.
Okay. Council President Troutner.
Here.
Councilmember Boyce.
Yeah.
Councilmember Fincher.
Here.
Councilmember Core.
Here.
Councilmember Larmer.
Here.
Councilmember Michaud.
Here.
Councilmember Thomas. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kim. Moving on, are there any changes to the agenda from councilor staff?
Yes, Madam President. Staff recommends the council swap items 4M and 4N. That would simply keep the transportation items together and move the snow and ice update to the very end.
Perfect. We will go ahead and move forward with those changes then. Thank you very much. We will get started now. We have quite a few presentations on our list, and the first one up is information only, and this is about the City Council Committee proposal. So if you recall, back during our retreat, several council members had asked about going back to some type of an individual committee system that we had. I believe we switched back somewhere towards the end of October 2019. And so I listened to your request. During that time, it was recommended that we form a small group that would get together and talk about what that would look like. So I want to thank Councilmember Boyce and Councilmember Fincher for joining me, and then also Derek Matheson in that conversation of what going back to this type of a format would look like. And we came up with an option, which I know has been shared with all of my colleagues, because we all took different roles in contacting you to let you know what we talked about in that meeting. And I just kind of like to go over that with you all and then take any questions. So this particular option that we looked at would have 3 committees. We would have Public Works Committee, Parks and Human Services Committee, and then an Economic and Community Development Committee. The Operations and Public Safety Committee would meet as one group of 7 of us. I think that when you look at those 2 committees, that information is very important, that it is heard by all 7 of us, especially when it comes to the operations of the department. And then I'm pretty sure everyone wants to be a part of public safety. The Public Works Committee would have 3 members, and as well as the Parks and Human Services and the Economic and Community Development. Some of the things that we talked about is that Operations and Public Safety Committee would be run kind of similar to what we're doing now. I would facilitate that meeting, but I certainly would not be the chair of that meeting, where all of the other committees would have a chair that would run that meeting and meet with the director to set the agenda. That Public Works or Public Safety and Operations meeting would meet on the 1st and 3rd Tuesday at 4 p.m. So it would be prior to city council meetings, and then we would go into workshop, and then we would have our council meeting. Public Works, they would typically meet twice a month, and that would be determined by the chair of that group. Parks and Human Services would meet once per month, and that also would be determined by the chair. But there was kind of some talk about possibly having that run back to back with the Economic and Community Development meeting that would also meet once a month. But again, that would be at the discretion of who would chair that committee. So we talked about lots of things during that retreat. I know Councilmember Larmer, you did your homework and you presented to us a chart that had information on what other cities are doing. Just to kind of make a note on that, a majority of those cities are going to Committee of the Whole. In fact, I actually talked to one of the council members from City of Des Moines, she had called me last week to talk to me about how we do that, because they're trying to look at being more efficient and saving money with staffing all of those meetings. So let me just kind of look over my notes and make sure that I didn't miss anything else. We do have some next steps that we can talk about, but at this point, I just want to know if any of my colleagues have any particular questions about this. Councilmember Michaud.
Thank you, Council President. I missed it. Did you say that the operations and public safety would be before the workshops?
Yes, that would meet on the first and third Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Something else that I didn't mention and that Councilmember Boyce and Councilmember Fincher and I talked about is this plan would be implemented at the beginning of September. That gives time for us to come up with this resolution, and it would allow me time to reach out to council members to see what committees they'd like to be on, make those appointments, and then kind of that thought process of kids are going back to school. Parents might have to adjust their schedules at that point, but that gives colleagues a chance to adjust their schedules and make sure that whatever those committees decide on for the times to meet, that they're able to attend. And Councilmember Fincher, you have your hand up. Or I'm sorry, Councilmember Core, sorry.
Yeah, my question here is basically when we went back to committees of the whole, it took us a month to go back from committees to committee of the whole. Why is it taking us 6 months to go back from committee of the whole to committees? I mean, it's really not that hard. It's really not that different. So my feedback would be sooner than September.
And I appreciate that. I think as a thought process, when the three of us met to talk about this, we do have to send this back to staff to be able to put together a resolution, which is done by our city attorney. Then it's a matter of forming those committees. It's adjusting some of our staff time, how IT will work to be able to, because we went from all these different meetings down to just one. Now we're going to have to make sure we have staff that is taking notes during those meetings, also doing the video, and then that allows some of my colleagues that may have to adjust their schedule at that time. It was just a conversation that we had that we all agreed that September was a good time frame. And with COVID, I don't anticipate that we will be meeting in person before that.
Councilman Court, I think it took us a little longer. I know we talked about it because I kind of brought it. It may not took us 6 months. It definitely took us more than a month to implement CALA. We talked about it for quite a while before we implemented it. It might not have taken 6 months, but I know it was more than a month. So just want to throw that out there.
Councilmember Larmer.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. So I just want to confirm. So by starting at 4 o'clock prior to workshop, we're only giving public safety and operations, is the idea to give it an hour and then we still have workshop, or would it run into what would normally be our workshop time? And then also follow up to that, like what is the sort of the intent of workshop? Because that was, I think, one of my requests is that we take a look at, what that's being used for as well. We seem to have a whole lot of, information only opportunities, and I just want to make sure we're using our time wisely.
So the idea of having operations and public safety would just be during that hour. To be honest, when we had public safety before, a lot of times those meetings were very short, and very often we canceled those meetings because most of the things that come through there is just an update with the chief on things that have been happening. And a lot of that he's already doing during our council meetings every other Tuesday. So I don't anticipate that report to be very long. Same with operations. We're getting that information right now during Committee of the Whole. It's when we look at our quarterly reports, any budget adjustments, things like that. So I don't anticipate that meeting would take up more than an hour. And then your other question was the workshops. Those just give us another opportunity to have reports from staff that might take a little bit longer than something that might happen in your committee. There might also be a need to bring something through workshop, because if you think about things that come through Public Works, it comes to Public Works, then it has to come to council. And sometimes, now with Committee of the Whole, we're able to move that to the next consent calendar for that week. There may be some times when something has to come through a little bit faster because you're not having a Public Works meeting or a Parks meeting where something needs to come through. We may have to take action from time to time in the workshop. So, Derek, if there's anything else I'm missing at that, please feel free to jump in.
I think workshop would have a very similar flavor to what it has right now, with a combination of policy issues that require greater depth or more council involvement than is possible in the committees, and then also operational updates. I will add that when I briefed the leadership team on this proposal, I got a suggestion back, which I think is a very good suggestion. If the council discusses something in workshop, there should be a pathway direct to the consent calendar if the council's agreeable. It shouldn't have to go back to one of the committees in order to get onto the full council consent calendar. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
So Derek, would that be the norm going forward, or would that be one-off?
I think it would be more one-off. I think most policy issues would go through committees to council. Bigger issues might have a discussion along the way in workshop, but the final action most of the time would be a committee putting the item onto the full council's consent calendar.
Okay. And I guess, Councilman Lara, I want to make sure to answer your question around the workshop. I know for the most part, a lot of those, Derek can validate. I mean, they are jockeying to get on their schedule, because sometimes they are maybe 2 or 3 months out where the schedule is already out there where people want to be scheduled. Sometimes if something come up, we may have to bump it. But for the most part, I think that agenda is probably 3 to 4 months out. Will that be a correct statement, Derek?
Yes, we're currently booked into the fall. So when we want to add workshop topics, it's a negotiation in the agenda setting meeting.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right, so any other questions or comments?
I'm assuming you're going to talk about the committee next.
Well, so as far as next step goes, as long as everyone is okay with moving forward with this type of format, what we will do is we will have the city attorney kind of work on drafting up a new resolution. That's what we did when we moved to Committee of the Whole, is it requires us to make a resolution. So we will have that drafted up. That will come back to council at some point for adoption. And then at that point, I will solicit information from all of you on what you're interested in participating in as far as committees go, and then work on making those appointments. And then we would have this all ready to go with our first meeting in September.
Madam President, can you maybe briefly talk about what that could possibly look like for us being on committee, how that process will work? Are you ready to talk about that yet?
I'm not, honestly, Bill, I would love to be able to talk about that, but I want to hear from my council members, because I have only talked to a few of you, and I'd really like to know at some point, and you can share those with me, at any time if you want to send me a message or give me a phone call. But I just kind of like to know, we have 3 committees, and if you can just rank those from your top committee, your second, and then your third committee, that would just really help me to kind of know where people's interests are and make sure that I'm, being fair with everyone. So I hope that's okay.
Yeah,
I understand where your interests are. From a lot of you, I can kind of guess on some different committees that you'd like to be on. So I really,
I guess was what I was gonna. I did talk to Councilmember Core, right? So there's certain people have certain passion about being on certain committees, right? So I think what you're saying that you can pick your top 1, top 2, top 3, and I'm hoping for the most part people would have it should work out with 9 spots that they should be able to. We should be able to accommodate most everybody, would be my guess.
Absolutely, and just to be fair, I will not chair any of those committees. The chair of those committees will be, one of you in each one of those committees. So I will be very fair with that.
Yeah.
And try to accommodate, some people may be on two committees. We may have someone that chairs a committee while someone else is on two committees. Just trying to be fair and make sure that everybody is getting to at least be on something that they want to participate on.
And I guess before we move on, Madam President, I mean, for me, it'd be nice maybe just to get a little nod to make sure everybody's okay with the direction we going, and then that way are you okay with it? I don't know.
Yep, I need to know, are we okay with having Pat start working on this?
My thumbs up.
Okay. I'm seeing head nods. I know Councilmember Thomas is not here, but I also know that I have had a conversation with him as well. So with that, we will go ahead and have Pat start working on getting that resolution together, and then I will keep everyone updated on when we can expect to have something back for us to look at. Perfect. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate everyone's patience as we kind of work through this and get back to a little bit of normalcy. So thank you very much. Moving on in our department presentations, we have payment of bills, which everyone gets that through email. So if there are no questions, we will move that forward to consent calendar. And then that brings us to the city's B&O tax extension to outdoor warehousing activities, which is just information only. So welcome to Paula.
Good evening, Council President Troutner and members of the City Council. I'm Paula Painter, Finance Director. I'm here today to talk to you about the outdoor warehousing square footage tax that was passed by Council back in September of 2020. At the time of that the ordinance was passed, the intent of the ordinance was to establish a 6-acre threshold that was independent of any other thresholds for taxing this outdoor warehousing activities. And currently, the way that it is written in code, it could be interpreted that this would be an additional tax. So ultimately, what it would mean, the way it's written now, is if you had a business that met the minimum threshold for their warehouse, let's say they have a 5,000 square foot warehouse, meets the criteria, all of a sudden, if they do have any area outside where it would meet the criteria of outdoor warehousing, that portion would be taxed whether or not it met that 6-acre threshold. So for example, if you had a business that had an additional 100,000 square feet of outdoor warehousing, that could actually increase their tax by about $36,000 a year. And I know when we brought this forward, that really wasn't our intent. When we did the outreach to the businesses, none of these businesses were included. And then unfortunately, because this is a little bit trickier, there's not sufficient information for us to be even able to narrow down what businesses would truly be impacted, because first they'd have to meet the square footage for inside. And then when you look at the outside, remember the outdoor square footage, what qualifies for that is pretty defined, which means it's not all outdoor storage. It does have to meet that criteria of warehousing activities that are being done outside. So right now, we're kind of at a crossroads of what we have in our information, or in our code, would require businesses to pay more taxes than what was intended. So the reason I come to you tonight is to get some direction from you on how you want to proceed with this. Right now, if we want to go back, or if we want to go with the original intent, which is that there is a 6-acre threshold that stands alone, it's not dependent on any other criteria or any other threshold, then we would need to revise the code and bring that
So,
back
for
to you.
example, if he says,
And we're on a little bit of a time crunch with this because we're nearing the end of the first quarter of 2021. We're almost at the end of February here. The quarter ends at the end of March. We need to get the code updated to go with your intent, which would mean we would want to bring it back to council next week with those revisions if that is the direction that you want to go. So at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have, and then also hope to get some direction from you on how you'd like to proceed.
Thank you, Paula. So questions or comments for Paula? Because like you heard, she's looking for some direction on this. Councilmember Fincher.
Thank you. I'm in favor of going with what our original intent was. So, that's what we said at the time. That's what we put out to people that we were going to do. It's important that that's what we do, and it meets the goal that we had in mind at the time.
All right, Councilmember Larmer, followed by Councilmember Boyce.
Actually, I think I'd like to defer to Councilmember Boyce and have him go first.
Appreciate that. I will agree with Councilmember Fincher, right? I mean, that was our intention in the beginning, right? When we first started looking at this year. And I think there have been some communication out there, I think, already about this year. And we have to change that. We need to go back and re-communicate, right? So my preference is kind of stick to our words and move forward for that reason.
Thanks, Councilmember Boyce. Councilmember Larmer.
Yeah, so I guess maybe I'm just a little confused. So we're going back to our original intent, which I agree with my fellow council members. We absolutely should sort of stick to our word. But this isn't removing the outdoor warehousing for those. Okay. So we're just making sure we're not impacting the unintended consequence on businesses. Okay. Thank you. In that case, exactly. Then, yeah, I agree with my fellow council members that we should go back and make sure that we're not having that unintended consequence on these businesses.
I do have one follow-up question, Madam President. I read into the ordinance, Paula, and it said it's supposed to take effect January 1st, 2021. Is that the case, or?
Yeah, it would be the recommendation that we update the ordinance and backdate it so it still is effective January 1st, 2021. Because this is a quarterly tax, it's paid on a quarterly basis. The first round of taxes are due by April 30th. So nobody is paid in for this at this point in time.
And when we communicate this earlier, so people understand what's going to happen in 2021 first quarter, right?
That is correct. Yeah, that was all part of the communication that we did back in May and June with the businesses we thought might be impacted by this.
Good. Thank you so much.
All right. Anybody else want to weigh in on this or give Paula some direction? Paula, I'm okay as well, keeping this the way that we intended it to be. Anybody else have any objection to, it looks like we kind of have a consensus of keeping it as is. Anybody have any objections or?
Madam President, just for the next step, so if we all agree, again, I just want to make sure I understand the next step and the timeline, please.
All right. So if we're going with the original intent, it would really be in the best interest of us bringing this forth on Tuesday next week to the full council meeting. And that would be a revised ordinance to be able to get that passed, because we will be updating our website with all of this information. So it'd be great to have all of that lined up before any tax is due.
Perfect. Is everyone okay then with Paula moving forward with this and bringing it back next week? All right, Paula, hopefully that helps you.
That does. Thank you all very much.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Next up, I'd like to welcome Tim Higgins to talk about the temporary modification of the T-Bird license agreement to allow for players for play at accesso ShoWare centers. So welcome.
Actually, Council, I think I'm going to introduce this first, and then Tim's going to follow up behind me, if that's okay.
Perfect.
All right. So we have some good news. Tim Higgins and the Thunderbirds have reached an agreement to start up hockey again, and this was done with the WHL involved. And so the Western Hockey League is going to start playing hockey again at the ShoWare Center. Unfortunately, there won't be any fans in attendance, but it's good to get the program back up and going. So I'm going to real quick talk about a modification to the current license agreement that we negotiated with the Thunderbirds to make this happen. So as you may or may not know, we have a 30-year agreement with the Thunderbirds for use of the facility. And that agreement is based the city's income from that agreement is based largely on fan attendance, on portions of ticket sales, et cetera. And since there are going to be no ticket sales, we have to be able to amend the agreement essentially temporarily to allow them to play. And it's important that we do this in a way that it's at no cost to the city. And so over the past few weeks, Tim and I have been working with the Thunderbirds, and we've come to an agreement that we're referring to as a temporary modification. You have that in your council packet there. This temporary modification allows the Thunderbirds to play at the arena. It allows the center to install ice, have employees work these games to the extent they're needed, provides for cleaning of the facility, et cetera. And the idea here is that it will be cost neutral to the city of Kent. So the agreement you have before you establishes those terms. You'll see the cost schedule on page 2 of that agreement. And that's all designed to ensure that the Thunderbirds are paying for the cost of having to install ice, have the facility open for players, clean the facility to ensure that we're in compliance with COVID rules, et cetera. And when they're all done, to remove the ice and return the building back to a quiet, I don't want to say dark, that's so ominous, but a more quiet space. So just some of the quick details, it's actually a pretty simple agreement. The T-Birds will be invoiced about 3 times. And then we address the potential, fingers crossed, that at some point during this agreement, some members of the public or some amount of the public or the facility would be able to reopen. We've indicated that if the facility opens at 100% capacity, then we just go back to the existing 30-year agreement that we currently have. High hopes on that, I guess. And then the parties agree that if the state allows a partial reopening to allow fans attendance and ticket sales, that we will sit down and work out some kind of resolution. The other part of this agreement that's important is if something, I hate to even say this, but if COVID were to start to rage again and play was terminated by the state or the WHL, then all play would cease. The T-Birds would pay the costs of ice removal, and we'd just return to a completely dark facility. So the agreement you'll see on page 4 requires the T-Birds to comply with the governor's orders. It requires compliance with certain sporting activities, some rules that the WHL has instituted to ensure player safety, and that's about it. So it's actually a pretty simple agreement. The whole idea here is that we can open the facility for play, and that at the end of the day, it will be a cost-neutral proposition to the city. So I can answer any questions on the agreement itself if you like, but Tim is here quickly. I think he's going to have a few words, and I think Colin's here as well to talk about this issue.
So Pat, I've got a couple hands raised. Are these questions for Pat?
Yeah, on agreement, yes.
Perfect. So
Mine is probably more for Tim. So
okay, so Councilmember Boyce, go ahead and go first then.
Hey, Pat, just to make sure I understand you, so this agreement is set strictly for no fan. If we go to full-time, will it automatic default to the original agreement, number one? And secondly, okay, and if it goes to half fan, part-time, then you got to work out another agreement or this part?
Yeah, we would sit down, and I think the only issue there would be how to manage cost.
Okay.
In a manner that is consistent with the current agreement, knowing full well that we're only going to have a half-filled building. So we would agree to sit down and ensure that, that whatever arrangement for splitting ticket sales and whatnot is fair to both parties and consistent with the current 30-year licensing agreement.
And when we go back to full-time, you don't need to bring this back to that. That's already built in. It'll happen automatically, right?
This terminates in May. Play is supposed to end in May, and then it just reverts back to the old agreement. It's just a temporary stopgap to allow them to come in and play some hockey.
All right, any other questions for Pat? All right, Tim, did you want to say a couple things? Then I think Councilmember Larmer has a question.
Yes, Council President, Council members, hockey is back. To your statement earlier, Council President, we're getting back to maybe some normalcy. We are starting to make ice on Thursday evening. The Thunderbirds building and the WHL have been working diligently with the governor's office on a return to play protocol for the past few months, and we now have guidelines to move forward. And through our, as Pat references, through our building and team partnership and combined efforts, there will be no cost to the building with the team practicing and playing games with no fans. So, and yes, those of you that are wondering, hockey and vaccinations will coexist for the next couple of months. I have Colin and Russ here, as you can see, and I'm going to turn it over to them if there's any questions at this time, and to talk about how playing games is necessary for this 2021 season. So, and if needed, I'll be available for any further questions after Colin and Russ speaks, unless beforehand. So, Colin?
Yeah, I'm going to open up. It's Russ Farwell here, and then Colin will finish up with things. We appreciate the chance to give you an update. So many of the council are new since we worked with the city to bring the Thunderbirds here. And on behalf of Dan and Lindsay Laquelle to the new ownership, we appreciate the chance to give you an update and tell you where we're at through the present circumstances. This agreement allows us to play a short 24-game season. And the reason for that is we just felt it's critical we provide development for our players. They're in an age where they just can't sit idly. So we need to provide some sort of a development situation for them and exposure for the NHL draft that is still going forward. As you know, our players are 16 to 20, and they're all playing to have earn an opportunity to have a chance to be hockey players. And if they go on to pro, then we're done with them at that point. If they don't, then they earn a year's scholarship for each year they play for the team, and they can use that at any post-secondary, whether it be university or trade school or even specialized fire college or pilot training or anything that they choose. And the teams have honored or covering those scholarships for this season, even though we're not playing. And we have a number of players that are ranked for this year's draft. And it's a little extra exciting because this is the first year that Seattle is going to participate in that draft. So we're feeling the pressure to get our guys in front of them and give them this opportunity going forward. We're expecting, as explained, that all the games will be without fans. So this is strictly an additional cost to what has already been a real devastating hit for the team and for really our whole league to this point in time. But our partnership has been very sound with the city of Kent, and we are doing this to really just to keep our business viable. We have to maintain our place in the industry and provide this opportunity for our players, and that's why we felt it was important. To this point, all 22 teams are providing this for their teams. They're going to participate in this schedule. And provided we can start in the fall, we think all the teams are going to be okay and come through, start to rebuild their situation from a business standpoint. As you know, our entire model is based on selling tickets and having people at the games, and it's right now we're just biting this off and feel it's really important to our player group and or our fans to provide some kind of play for this season. And so, our ownership is very committed still to the team, and we're looking forward to getting back on the ice and feel this is a step we really need to take. Anything to add, Colin?
Yeah, I think Russ and Tim both said it. The partnership has been just the key to right from the very get-go with our working with the city to get the building and going forward, and what we've gone through in the last year. Minor league sports has probably been hit as hard as the restaurant industry and things like that. When we're totally driven on ticket sales, that's been shut down as of March 12th last year. So since then, we've been working closely with the city, Tim, the building, our league, and even the state to come up with the protocols that are going to allow us to move forward. So we worked with the state on the return to play program that all the U.S. division teams are going to follow, and it's quite in-depth. It involves testing of our players 3 times a week while they're here. We have an app that the players are on that they fill out every morning that we monitor their conditioning in addition to their billet families. So the partnership has grown and come to the situation where we are right now. And that, as Russ said, in order to maintain our development model and our business structure long-term, the comment was we have a 30-year lease. So in order for us to maintain our business model and the ability to track those top players that we've been able to get here, and some of the ones that are playing in the NHL now that were on the championship team that we had here in 2017. And as Russ said, with the Kraken doing their first draft this year, and we've got some high-profile players, we were starting to run the risk of those players going elsewhere. Because they are playing hockey in Europe, they are playing hockey in other parts of the country. So it became critical that we come to some sort of agreement and come up with a way that we could play these games, and taking away the risk from the city and covering the cost with it and taking that on for the long-term partnership. We felt we had to do that in order to maintain our business model. So we thank the city and all of you and Tim for the work in coming up with a plan. It was ever evolving as we did it, and as we became a vaccination site, things changed again with it, and we found a way to adapt, and our players will start to arrive later this week. And as Tim said, ice is going in, and we look forward to the first game on March 19th. In addition, we're working closely with Joe TV and Fox in order to try and get as many of these games televised out of here as we can, so that you guys can still follow us and our fans can still follow us. So our hope is to get as many of those, and our fingers are crossed and hopeful that we can welcome our fans and you guys all back to the accesso ShoWare Center in the fall and some sort of normalcy as we find our way through this and move forward. So thank you.
Thank you so much. This is really exciting. Throughout this whole situation, we have learned to do things differently and to be creative, and it's just amazing how everyone has come together to make this happen, and it's going to be fun to watch again, so I'm looking forward to it. I am going to turn to Councilmember Larmer and then Councilmember Boyce for questions.
Thank you, Council President. So question on the coexistence of the vaccine clinic and the play. As we ramp up vaccine clinic, is there any impact you said they'll coexist today, but as we try to add capacity to vaccines, is there an impact on our ability to ramp up that operation?
No, actually, we talked about that with the county on how this will develop. As it sits now, our vaccinations are in the concourse only. We see in this current setup that we could do close to 3,000 if we go 16 hours a day. After May 9th, when we take the ice out, the goal is to bring that into the Arena Bowl. So no, it works. And we're pretty excited to have this coexist. So.
Yeah, I'm very excited. So glad to hear that hockey's coming back. So thanks.
Yes, thank you.
We see it as a tremendous opportunity to expose some new people that don't even know hockey's in here. So there's going to be a chance
nice.
to create some new fans.
Councilmember Boyce, followed by Councilmember Corr.
Thank you, Madam President. Colin, Russ, nice to see you guys. Hope you're doing well. Question for probably Tim. So a couple of questions, really. So I know there's no cost to the city. Are there any costs to you? I mean, does it impact you and your business? Because there's some thing that you guys need to do. That's my first question around the cost. Then the second question is, are they home games? So do your team have to travel to places as well too? Because you play different. And then the other one is around Portland. And don't Oregon have a different COVID guideline than Washington State? So those are my three questions. I hope you can answer those, please.
I can take the Portland one. Right from the very start, when we worked with John Snyder, who's one of senior advisors for Governor Inslee, and the plan was to come up with a way for each of our centers, and they were working with Oregon at the same time, so that Portland would be able to play out of Oregon and we would be able to travel to Oregon and vice versa. As we worked through it, Oregon changed in that they shut down the ability for the Winterhawks to play there, but the state of Washington is still allowing them to travel to play games in Washington. So we will travel to Spokane, Tri-Cities, Everett, and if Oregon opens up later on, to Oregon. And then Portland will play some of their home games here because they've opened it up now and are accepting an application from the Winterhawks going forward as well too. So it could switch partway through, but when we start the schedule, the middle of March, Portland will be playing their home games out of the Accesso ShoWare Center, and we will as well too. So we're going to coexist, and all of the managing of space, we work closely with Tim and his staff to figure out where we can make all this work. We've worked with King County Health. We've worked with the state health department on making sure that we're social distancing and keeping all of those things from a COVID standpoint in place. And then with respect to your cost question, we're paying the staffing costs for putting the ice in. We're paying the staffing costs for the Zamboni drivers for our practices. So that's what we've covered with Tim, is just coming up with all of those incidental costs that are associated with us coming back into the building, and we'll meet on a monthly basis and settle up and agree on what those expenses were and how they were arrived at. We're, again, working closely to monitor how much staff we have in here, how it's going to work, and we're ultimately responsible for all of those costs.
And one follow-up, Colin. So when Portland come here, will they help share the costs with some of that as well too?
They are going to share part of the costs, yes. And we're working through just finalizing those details, but yes, they will cover. There won't be any costs for them coming here. They'll be paying to be a part of how we recoup all of that stuff.
And this one last comment, Colin and Russ got to work with both of you guys a lot, as well as Tim. You guys are doing a phenomenal job, really, just trying to find a way to make things happen, being upbeat, staying positive. So I just want to say kudos to you, Colin, Russ, and especially my man, Tim, right? Really trying to make things happen. So I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciate that and all you guys do for us to make it happen down here too. So.
Well said, Councilmember Boyce. Councilmember Corey, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Tim. I think this is exciting news for the fans who have been waiting for a long time now. I just want to say thank you for this sort of good news in the right direction. And Councilmember Boyce already asked some of my questions, so I just want to say I think this will also open up a door for the Sikh community who haven't been able to come to ShoWare Center to watch the games because of the Kirpan issue we have. They might be able to get back into ice hockey without entering the building. So something we'll continue working on. We'll have that conversation once this COVID thing is over. Just want to put that out on your radar again. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember Corr. Does anyone else have any comments or questions? All right. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Super, super excited about this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to move on in the agenda. Next up, we have the Bridges Oakpointe Ordinance to amend the Comprehensive Plan Land Use Map. And this does require council action. So I'd like to welcome, I think, Matt Gilbert. Are you presenting?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Council President. I think I'll go ahead and share my screen. If you give me a moment. And talk about our latest land use, our 2021 Comprehensive Plan Amendment. This is presented to us by Oakpointe Communities. I know I've talked to you all, or some of you at least, about this on a couple of occasions. So I'd just like to kind of reorient you to the site and to some of the process and go through the criteria and talk about how this relates to our comp plan and urban separators. I'll tell you the end first. We are recommending approval of this. So I hope to shed some light on why, and we'll look to move this ahead to the council meeting on March 2nd. So just to reorient you now, this proposal is part of the 155-acre Bridges community. As you'll remember, this is located south of Kent's contiguous boundaries at 124th and 304th. Most of that neighborhood is clustered to the north. It's about 386 homes. There are a few that kind of come down south a little bit there, but you'll see the blue area on my screen. It's the 13.2 acres that was previously identified as a future development tract. And when I say previously, I'm talking about when the PUD was approved in the early to mid 2000s. There were a couple phases there, but that was a site that was identified for future commercial development, which is allowed in PUDs under Kent's code. The commercial development was approved prior to the Great Recession in 2008 and 9, and throughout 9 and 10, that sat with no activity. And so as time has gone on, the applicant has shared that a new market has sort of emerged, which does not favor more commercial development. And so they're considering now that housing should be something that is open, that is on the table for consideration here. And so this decision, this proposal really just adds housing to the list of potential future uses. There are several steps that would remain to be taken in order to approve a development, but this just puts multifamily housing on the table for consideration. So I may have gotten ahead of myself there, but as I said, there's the site with the blue arrow just south of the Kent border on 124th. So this would probably be as good a time as any to talk about the kind of odd reality that this site faces, which is that it's entirely surrounded by the city of Auburn. As most of you know, we were in conversations with the city of Auburn for the last few years about de-annexing this land and having Auburn annex it. Annexation conversations can be quite detailed. There's a lot to consider for a city before they take on land. And Auburn went through their process of evaluating what was out there in terms of infrastructure, primarily, and the other responsibilities that they would have, and have concluded that the annexation should not move forward. Because of that, and because of the time that's kind of elapsed since 2018 when this proposal was first made, it's now appropriate for the city of Kent to move forward with the decision on this proposal to change the designation from urban separator, which is what the land is today, to what's called low density multifamily. So here you see, this is a little, I'll just walk you through this. The zoning is on the left. Now the zoning and comprehensive plan designations kind of work together. The zoning really implements the comprehensive plan. So you see the green area on the lower right includes the southern area of this site, or urban separator. Then it's zoned SR1. So this action, again, would not change the zoning. It would only change a portion of the green area to allow low density multifamily. A rezone would need to be proposed and processed in the future in order to actually change the zoning and allow development. So I'm sorry to bounce back and forth, but here's just one more shot of the site. As you can see, there's quite a bit of residential development that surrounds it. So this kind of is going to feed into my comments later on the urban separator. Urban separators tend to be, or are intended to be, corridors of green space for wildlife and open space enjoyment and things like that. One of the reasons that this site is not particularly well suited to that designation is the fact that it's surrounded on at least 3 sides by residential development. So so development of this site would not be kind of out of character with what surrounds it. Just to get into the particulars, I think I've covered most of this in the told you about the proposal. If this were approved, it would allow a subsequent proposal by the owner to rezone the property. And there's a range of zones that the comprehensive plan allows in the low density multifamily designation. And that would be single family 8 units per acre, multifamily, it's called MRG, which I believe is a 12 unit per acre or so. Then a couple of zones that have 16 units per acre are allowed. And so those would be on the table, ranging, like I said, from 8 to 16 units per acre. So the code contains criteria that the council and staff use to evaluate these types of proposals. And they're fairly wordy and are full of legalese. I think I'm fairly paraphrasing when I say that they basically say that the proposal won't cause harm to the public health, safety, and welfare, that there's something new that's happened since the comp plan adoption, that there's some long-term benefits to the community, and that this is consistent with other goals and policies of the comp plan. I would say there's no harm to the public health, safety, and welfare, primarily because any development that ever takes place here will be subject to a host of development regulations that address aesthetics, they address environment, they address traffic impacts, school impacts, fire impacts, etc. So we know how to regulate development, and this site would certainly be subject to those regulations. As far as new information, this site was designated in 2004 as urban separator. Since then, Auburn has annexed around the area under the Lee Hill annexation. There's been a lot of development that's gone with that as far as homes and schools and retail to the south. This is just a different place than it was then. And I mean, in addition to the bridge's development itself, it's built out 386 homes since this comp plan adoption. So there's a new reality, as well as just the market realities that dictate what land uses can really be economically viable at the site. Those have certainly changed since 2004. As far as long-term benefits to the community, I think what this would really promote is additional and more diverse housing. If this were to be zoned 16 units per acre, the applicant has indicated that they would propose townhomes. This is a type of a housing type that's not really well represented in Kent or in the area that surrounds it. So it's, we're looking at using our land more effectively, getting higher densities is one way that we can add supply to the additional supply to the housing market through policy. So this, I think, because of all of the regulations that protect the environment, that protect the public. I think it makes sense as a benefit to the community to open up some land to a little bit higher density zoning. And as far as the rest of the comprehensive plan, this really does not, I think this interacts very well with the rest of the comp plan. It meets, there's several goals and policies that I think support this type of move. And a few of those relate to, like I said, variety and density. Our comp plan envisions those things within close proximity to employment, shopping, transit. This is on a transit line on 124th. Obviously, it has access to the valley, like much of the East Hill does. It gives, it makes sense from a employment standpoint. Obviously, housing types. This would represent an opportunity for a new housing type. And so there, and then the last one that I kind of focused on in my staff report is really about the urban separator. It's called urban separator today, and I know that there's been some council decisions in the last few years about urban separators. Staff had brought forth a proposal, or had brought forth an option to make some changes to our urban separator regulations a few years ago, and there was some public that said that they didn't want to see that, and the council took no action. I think this urban separator is somewhat unique in that number one, commercial development is allowed at this site today. So the urban separator designation doesn't really represent well what seeing that on the map doesn't really express what's allowed here. And that commercial is allowed because of the PUD. So like I said before, if we added housing here, it would just expand the uses that could go here. So also, I'll get to a map in a moment, but this urban separator is non-contiguous with Auburn's urban separators, as well as King County's urban separators. So this is an area that could be carved out of this urban separator designation and changed without impacting that broader goal that urban separators have of creating these open spaces and wildlife corridors and all of the things that these green corridors provide. And I see a few hands. I promise I'll wrap this up as quickly as possible. Okay, so I think I covered that. So here's the map of the King County designated urban separators that are in the Lee Hill area. You see those in the green hash mark. So there is a bit, like I showed you, there's some urban separator in the Kent designated area on the southern half of that white bridges area. But this area down to the south of the parcel would be non-contiguous with that county corridor. So we felt, again, it doesn't have the same value as something that was contiguous. Finally, just to help you orient to the process before anything gets built, there would need to be a council decision. Then later, the zoning would need to be changed, and the planned unit development approval would need to be revised. That would be through a public process that would before the hearing examiner, who would make a recommendation on the rezone to the city council. So you would see this again, and there would be plenty of public process. There would, of course, also be construction permits. Actually, I wanted to touch on one other thing regarding public process. We did have a hearing in front of the Land Use and Planning Board on February 8th. There were several speakers at that. We also had a meeting just this last Sunday in the Bridges neighborhood that the mayor hosted with several city staff, including the police from Police and Public Works and our communications staff, where about 30 or so residents from the Bridges turned out to ask questions and have some interaction with the mayor and the staff about the annexation, about this proposal, about concerns in general. And I would say that the comments and questions focused on two main areas. The first one was from the public hearing: why is Kent making this decision when this property will be moving over to Auburn soon? And the second was, why are you taking away our commercial development? So the first question, I think I covered that, that annexation process took some time to figure out, and now it has ended. So it is appropriate for Kent to make this decision. And as far as the commercial, that's, something that there's no law that says the commercial needs to be built. That's something that the land could sit empty forever. And this decision that I'm recommending you make tonight does not preclude future commercial development. It, like I said, it just adds housing to the mix. We expect that according to the applicant, they're not intending to pursue commercial. However, the door would still be open for that in the future. So I think I've covered everything I wanted to. I'll end it there, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Matt. I am going to go by hands raised. I'm going to go with Councilmember Thomas, followed by Larmer, then Core, then Michaud, then Fincher. So Councilmember Thomas, welcome.
Thank you, Council President. And I am sorry I'm late, but this has always been an interesting tract of land. I think originally it was going to be a water reservoir for us, the city of Kent. And then we negotiated some kind of deal where Auburn was able to get it. Well, I'm still confused. And my daughter lived there for several years. And it's Auburn School District. Yet every address up on the post, it'll say Kent underneath the numbers. And it's an interesting area. So I guess I'm going back to your original question of who has authority right now? You're saying Kent has the authority to make these changes and issue permits?
That's correct. This is within Kent's jurisdiction.
Right. So when does, and obviously it's too bad we can't re-annex it, but that's my desire, not Auburn's. So I remember when we did that commercial, and I don't have a problem with that. It'd actually be very helpful for that area to put a 7-Eleven, for example, a lot of houses, a lot of people. I don't see how it's going to help Kent very much. That's what I'm having struggles with, because it's all surrounded by Auburn. And I imagine most of those people will be going there to do a little bit of their shopping anyway. So that urban separator, is that in the blue line that you had? Or
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Councilmember Thomas, I could go back to that if you'd like.
No, I remember it. It's that lower southern portion of the property.
That's right.
My computer is doing some funny things. Okay, go ahead and go on to some other questions. I'm kind of, okay, here's the other part. When does Auburn completely take over the jurisdiction of that area?
Well, at this point, the conversations that would move us towards that have ended. And so if those conversations could start up later, but at this point, they have indicated to us that there are some, they have concerns, or they're not interested in taking on the responsibility of that land at this point.
You're saying Auburn is not?
That's correct. And they've told us
why are we stepping in the middle of this?
Madam Mayor, I see you're trying to get your hand in there. So do you want to give us some background if you don't mind?
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, Matt, but maybe I can weigh in on some of the conversations that have occurred with Auburn getting us to this point. So in response, several years ago, in response to a request from Auburn, as well as some of the neighbors that live in, so the way that I was referring to it this weekend with the neighbors, it's like the island of Kent, right? So it is Kent. They have Kent Water, but Auburn Sewer. They're Auburn School District, served by our police department. So it's a sort of a mishmash, but it's an island that exists that's Kent. We started the exploration of Kent de-annexing and Auburn annexing it in several weeks ago after Auburn's analysis of the infrastructure that exists there, our storm drainage, that kind of thing. They came back and said that they didn't feel it was compatible with what their code requires and how they would have built it, and asked if Kent would make a significant investment in some separation of some storm drainage and a variety of things. Our response back was, we're not going to invest $1 million to give that neighborhood away. That just doesn't make any sense. And I wouldn't be able to look our other 130,000 residents in the eye and say I spent $1 million so that we could send this neighborhood to Auburn.
Exactly.
So that effectively, we had a call like probably about 3 weeks ago with Auburn where we mutually agreed to stop the annexation conversation. There continues to be interest on the part of some neighbors. We heard on Sunday, not all of the neighbors, but there is a small portion of neighbors that are looking to continue to be annexed. Mayor Backus has, we spoke over the weekend, and they may be pursuing an ask of the neighbors and potentially Oakpointe to cover the costs of these things that they would like to see done. But as a city, we have said we're not making that investment. So for now, the annexation is off unless they come back with some sort of plan or change their mind on what they would require.
Let's take it back.
So we still have it. We've never given it away. They still are Kent residents. They've been Kent residents since those houses were built. And, you know, I would say we heard both sides from the neighbors on Sunday. And it's actually would be a little bit of an increase in cost for folks, for them to be annexed by Auburn. Their garbage rates go up. Some of their property tax goes up. So right now, we are required by law to proceed with this application because they're Kent and they're not going to not be Kent as far as we can tell. So we owe it to the private property owner to take action on their application.
And Mayor, am I right? They also vote for us as council members?
They do. They are Kent. So they're all Kent. So everything that they do that way is the city of Kent. So Kent has we have two public streets in that development. The rest of it is private road. And then there was also conversation with the neighbors with Oakpointe about things that they're hoping to see if the project, if the multifamily project were to go forward. And Brian Ross from Oakpointe did commit to them to having those conversations around things like where HOA dues go and reciprocal use on trails and that kind of stuff. So that conversation was had with the neighbors over the weekend.
One last question or comment, perhaps. Matt, can you go back to the map where it shows the entire area?
Yes, one moment, please.
My computer's doing some weird things. Oh.
And Matt, my question pertains to the map too, so you might as well
good.
Pick it up.
Okay. Go back another one or two where it shows the closeness. Oh, nope, keep going. It was pretty general. No, it wasn't one of those. I wanted to show. Okay. Nope. Oh, nope. Keep going. You're doing good. Keep going.
I'm out of maps. I can go the other way. You want to just tell me when to stop here?
All right. Well, let's take it from here. Then my computer came back on.
Okay.
Oh, wait. I think that's what I want. Oh, now I lost it. Where'd it go? Okay, we can do this. Where you have 124th, the white line running up north, it's we have a policy where we don't annex something that doesn't abut next to our property lines, but we're only a few houses away on 124th there from joining in, you might say, and abutting that neighborhood. And then I know where the mayor knows where I'm going with this.
Yeah, so Councilmember Thompson, it truly is an island. So
I know.
124th along the east side of this development is Auburn. It really is like you took a piece of Kent and set it down in Auburn. So there's no places that this abuts Kent. You have to physically leave Kent to get back into Kent.
What I'm suggesting is if we ever were to purchase those few homes there between, what is that, 218th and what must be 216th? You know, that's a possibility. I mean, hey, we have other little islands, like the Sioux Creek Reservoir area. That's a little island out there. It's actually a precinct. You know where I'm going with this. And I just think it would be nice to have them in Kent if they're wanting. We provide the police. I mean, they vote for us. It just seems like it's in Kent. It should be Kent, even if we're not quite connected.
And it is Kent. That's all of those things are true. It is Kent.
Yeah, I know. So that's
No, go ahead. Did you have any further questions? Like one or two?
So the population of that area is also included in our population?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you, Madam President and Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas. Councilmember Larmer, I believe you had a question about that same map, or did that get answered?
No. So yeah, if we could pull up the map again. Yes,
No,
actually, the one with the yellow line would be perfect.
Okay.
So
There it
the
is.
green area to the north, between the parcel we're talking about and then the parcels that are developed, all that grassy green area. What is going on in there? Is that was that part of urban separator? Would that be preserved for wildlife as well, or what is
Yes.
that?
Much of that is contained within wetland tracts that are permanently protected by our critical areas ordinance.
Great.
And a lot of that area that you see would continue to be zoned urban separator, or I'm sorry, designated urban separator on the comprehensive plan.
Okay. So really we're just developing, I mean, we're not, even if this were to be developed with some measure of density or commercial, since that is still allowed, we still have quite a bit of natural preserve on this, on our island. Is that my understanding?
Yes, that's correct. In fact, there are even wetland areas within the yellow area that will also be preserved.
Okay, great. I know, I think actually one of my first votes on ECD was the previous urban separator issue. And if I recall, that would have been a comprehensive change to all urban separators across the city. And so that we said no to, but this is just a specific parcel.
That's right. And I think that's a very important distinction.
Yeah. So, okay. Thank you. I think you've answered what I needed.
Thank you, Councilmember Larmer. Councilmember Kaur, followed by Michaud, followed by Fincher, and then Boyce.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. I guess I'm still trying to wrap my head around this because I was listening to City of Auburn's study session, which is a council workshop for us yesterday. And during that presentation, the feeling I got was it felt like not very positive messaging for City of Kent. And it looked like the Auburn was still willing to have a conversation. And I get it that, we don't want to take on the extra burden because this is part of, we're hoping they will annex it at some point because the residents there during conversations I've had in the past want to be part of Auburn. So I am still hesitant on approving something that's, maybe including them in the conversation somehow, because when I was listening to their study session last night, and it's online and anybody's welcome to go watch, just like our workshops, it didn't look like a very positive message about our city. It looked like we were the ones shutting them down, not willing to have a conversation. And I get it, people's own perspectives and their own biases. So it's a concern for me. And I feel like, and the council, some of the council members were not aware of the issue. I don't know. I feel like we just need to do a better job and maybe having a better conversation with the residents. And they did share the letter that the mayor sent out to the residents, and they were not happy with the first two sentences of that letter. On the letter that was sent out to the residents in the Bridges neighborhood. So I don't know how, but I think we need to have a better conversation with our neighbors and our neighboring city and the residents. And I understand, Mayor, you had a conversation with the neighbors that even us, we were unaware of. I mean, we would have loved to be listening in on that conversation to see what the neighbors are thinking. But I just don't know. I mean, I'm hesitant about this because listening in yesterday to Auburn, it felt like we're hearing one side, and we have maybe both sides in a room and having a conversation. We would have a better idea on where this is actually going in the future.
Madam President, I know I'm speaking out of, but I think it's important with the mayor. I do know the mayor met with the mayor of Auburn, and I know how ECDC people met with their peers. At the end of the day, when we annexed Panther Lake, they didn't ask us to do a bunch of stuff to annex them. And Auburn, I mean, they asking us to spend $1 million, and that's what the leadership, I think the mayor, you can talk to that in order for us to annex, right? So I think that's important when you talk about annexation. I don't know why Kent should spend $1 million plus so Auburn can take over the annexation. And I know, Mayor, maybe you can talk about that process if you to kind of address Councilmember core concern.
Thank you, Councilmember Boyce. Madam Mayor, I'd like to give you an opportunity if you'd like to share a little bit more about that.
Thank you. So there's two separate issues here. This change that is in front of you is actually for a project that Auburn and Oakpointe worked on. So even if annexation were to go forward, this is the preferred project for the city of Auburn. Auburn has been very clear about that. This change would need to occur. So regardless of annexation, that's the conference. This is a project that came out of Auburn's planning department. With regards to the annexation conversations, we have been meeting regularly with economic development in the mayor's office in Auburn for about the last 18 months. It was not till about month 16 and a half that they came back and said, here's the punch list of things we want you to do before we're willing to take this section of the city. That's not disputable. That is the conversation that occurred. So I don't know what was said at the meeting last night. Matt's been in on those conversations. Derek's been in on those conversations. So you don't have to take my word for it. We got to a point where Auburn said, make these changes, make this investment, or we won't take it. And we said, we don't have a budget of $1 million or whatever the number is to give the neighborhood away. And then with regards to the neighbors' feelings, so I would say we probably had 40 or 50 people in that park on Sunday, and there were four people that were very, very adamant about annexing into Auburn. And at the end of the meeting, there were at least twice as many that said, we don't want to see any changes. So I think it's all dependent on who you hear weighing in at a given time in the conversation. But my last conversation with Mayor Backus on Sunday was that Kent is willing to continue to participate in conversations. And if Auburn finds a path forward, we're open to that. So I got a thumbs up from her in a text that said, so would you like me to tell the neighborhood that if Auburn can find a way to convince the neighbors to pay for these changes, or Oakpointe in combination with Auburn, annexation would go forward? And she sent me a thumbs up. So we have not ended them. It's just now in Auburn's court to see if they can convince the neighbors to pay for these changes. And same conversation with the neighbors. There were a couple of people that said, I'm willing to pay. And there were also people that said, I absolutely am not willing to pay. So I don't think it's fair to characterize the conversations as Kent shut them down or we weren't being cooperative. We're open. I was in conversation with the mayor all weekend long. So it's not Kent ending that conversation by any stretch. And we have been at meetings. So again, to say that we're not attempting to have those conversations or they're not occurring is a mischaracterization of what's happening.
Thank you, Mayor. I hear you. But what I'm saying is what I heard during the meeting, like yesterday when I was listening into them, it sort of sounded like they made it sound like we weren't willing to have this conversation. And I was, I guess, not very happy about that. But that's just sort of what I guess the messaging I got from listening into them.
I think it's fair to say that Auburn is frustrated or disappointed with us for not wanting to make the investment so that they can take this neighborhood on. That is a fair characterization.
Less.
Matt, did you want to comment on this, or should I circle back to some questions?
Thank you, Council President. I just wanted to add, just to support what Mayor Ralph just said, that during those 18 months of meeting with staff, Kent provided huge amounts of information on our infrastructure within that area, as far maintenance records, construction plans, everything that they had asked us for in order to do that evaluation. It took them some time, and they were very deliberate about it, but it was we worked closely with them to help them come to their conclusion.
Thank you. Moving on to Councilmember Michaud.
Thank you, Council President. I have a couple of questions. The first one, I'll start with the meeting. I know when I talked to residents a little over a year ago, there was a lot of concern about response times for police. Did that come up at all in the meeting?
Madam President, is that okay?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay.
We did have extensive conversation with the neighbors on response times. That has gotten better. Same situation. We had some folks weigh in and say, we don't ever see Kent PD here. Another lady weighed in and said that she had called and had somebody out there in 5 minutes. So we provided them with some tools. We have committed to doing some additional patrols during slow times, which, as you know, is sometimes a challenge. But they will receive this. They receive the same level of service as all of our neighborhoods do. Talk to them about things like when they call and report something, if it's not an active situation, that they request to have an officer call them back. So one of the questions was, well, we called this in and nothing ever happened. But they hadn't requested to have an officer reach out to them. So it's very possible that the situation had been addressed. They just didn't have that follow-up. So we worked through those things, and commitment from Commander Thompson to work with patrol on getting more often drives through those neighborhoods. And I also know that they've worked with our community education department on block watch things and those kinds of issues.
Okay, thanks. And that is related, because if we change this, then we would add more homes there. Okay, so now I want to circle back to the urban separator thing, Matt. I really don't understand. This goes back to what Councilmember Larmer was kind of asking about. Right now it's urban separator, but they could build commercial there. But now you're saying that the rest of the urban separator would remain as urban separator. And so I don't really understand how this works. And I know it's complicated. So thanks
Sure. Yeah, I understand. So, and I'm sorry if I might need to repeat myself just to kind of walk through it. So the Kent City Code says that for PUDs that are over 100 acres, commercial uses can be built, subject to all the other environmental and development regulations. And those are the uses. Those uses are limited to our neighborhood convenience commercial zone. So this is just trying to recognize that when you get this many homes, it starts to make sense to introduce other uses that would add some amenity value to a big neighborhood. I mean, you could imagine, having a dentist office or a coffee shop or restaurants at that corner as being a nice thing. And certainly a lot of the neighbors that we've talked to have expressed some disappointment that hasn't happened yet. So while the area is zoned urban separator, that PUD allows more than what any other urban separator would allow. So, and these sites that are the 13 acres in yellow have been designated as future development sites. This was all contemplated through the PUD. So this is a different urban separator because of that. So now the proposal is to, but the applicant's saying the commercial development, there's really no market for commercial development, but we'd still like to develop the property. But in order to do anything other than commercial, they need this change. And so they're suggesting that townhomes would be something that they could build economically at that site. So this decision would open up beyond commercial uses in uses allowed there into townhomes. So townhomes or commercial, but likely, see, again, we're just looking at what's on the table as a possibility for the site. This would add townhomes to commercial. Again, this is getting way far away from what normal urban separators are, because most urban separators don't have a big PUD overlain on them. So the area outside of the yellow, I'm sorry, I took the map down, but outside of the boundaries of this request would remain urban separator. And as I was saying to Councilmember Larmer's question, a lot of that area beyond this site is encumbered with significant wetlands and wetland buffers. So the opportunities for development outside of this little area are practically nil. But this is an area that could support that. I hope that made sense.
Could you provide us with a map of the wetlands?
I don't have that available. I'm sorry. Those are contained
Not right
on
now.
the larger. Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
point?
I'm sorry. Of course. Sure.
I can help there a little.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Did you have it?
If I may, Council President.
Just very quickly, because I want to make sure everyone gets
Yes.
a chance to ask a question.
That map, when you see it, it forms kind of a valley, Andrea, and those two parallel trees that you see at the bottom of the south, that's a dried up creek bed. At least it used to be. There you go.
Yeah, they are extensive. They don't represent perfectly with the vegetation there, but yeah, I'm sorry I don't have that handy, but I will send that along just as soon as I can.
That's the lowest level of the whole entire area.
So Matt, do we have any guarantee that this other urban separator won't be developed?
As long as it's urban separator, this is, yes, I think it's the council's decision to zone on zoning, and zoning really dictates development. And under the urban separator designation and the SR1 zone, it's very restrictive. And when you add the wetland regulations over the top of that, it really, it's so limiting to any kind of development. Technically, in the SR1 zone, 1 home per acre could be built. But in this case, the PUD would limit that. The wetlands would limit that. Just access. There's many, many factors that would keep that urban separator from developing. So if this area in yellow were to change, that would effectively up the zoning there and allow development to happen eventually after permits and such.
Thank you, Matt.
All right, Councilmember Fincher, followed by Boyce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Matt, within that area where there's wetlands, do you happen to know today, is there enough contiguous land that somebody could build something there? So I'm going along with my previous council member. I know that it's up to a council, but I would like it to remain the area outside of what we're talking about today to remain urban separator. So do you happen to know today? Is there enough that could be built on?
I believe so. We haven't gone through a specific development proposal at this point. Right now, we're just talking in 30,000 foot terms, but just in talking with the applicant and how they've analyzed their own development plans per the wetlands that are out there, there's an opportunity there. There's high and dry, non-buffered area that could be built. Yeah.
So I'd like to see that.
I was going to say, Matt, can I just interject? I just want to clarify, urban separator does not mean you can't develop. Urban separator allows
certain development.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It allows 1 single family home per acre, and that's about it. So I'm sorry. The question was, you would like to see, Councilmember Fincher, you said you would like to see a development plan. Is that what you're referring to?
Oh, well, I'd like to see the map and see how much actually is wetland, and out of that remaining piece, how much is wetland, and to see where wetland is, where it's not designated wetland also within the urban separator.
Okay, that's something we can provide.
Thank you. I like having the opportunity. Can you guys hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a lot of echo.
So I like having the opportunity to have the multifamily, the low density multifamily. It helps fill that missing middle that we've talked about. It helps get people into home ownership at a lower cost than what is often available to them. Having townhomes adds to that menu of what is available here. Matt, I appreciate my conversations with you as well as with Mr. Ross. I will watch that or go online to find that study session from yesterday. I am not in favor of putting in $1 million into something that we're going to give away to Auburn or to anyone else. And I do remember us having a conversation on this pre-pandemic. So I know that it has been on the table a while. And that ends my comments on this.
Thank you, Councilmember Fincher. Councilmember Boyce.
Thank you, Madam President. Appreciate that. Number one, I think, Matt, I don't know if you said this or not, but these type of things go in front of the Land Use Planning Board prior to coming to the council. So did you talk about what was the outcome from it? So I might have missed that, but can you reiterate what was the recommendation from the Land Use Planning Board?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry I overlooked that, Councilmember Boyce. The result from the Land Use and Planning Board was a 5-0 vote to recommend approval. There was a lot of feedback from folks that were both inside the Bridges neighborhood and living in the adjacent neighborhoods. And their comments focused, like I said, mostly on the fact that they at the time under the impression that the annexation was moving forward. As the mayor said, that was kind of late breaking news. We've since updated them on that fact, on the fact that this will remain Kent for the foreseeable future. And second of all, that they had envisioned a commercial development here because that's what had been talked about at the inception of Bridges. And then there was a plan that was developed. And I think there were some people excited about that, but that was just a proposal. That's something that is not required. So this would represent a departure from that. And they were not thrilled by that fact, but what we didn't hear is opposition to townhomes. And so the board selected to move this forward unanimously.
I think it's critical, key, that our council member understand that it was unanimous coming out of the Land Use Planning Board. I'm in agreement with Councilmember Fincher, right? It's something we probably should move forward with it. Councilmember Thomas asked earlier, what do Kent benefit? But I think there'll be a lot of fee that will come out of this year for building this year possibility, and also the property tax. So there will be some cost of benefit that will come to the city. And then I want to say with the bridge, I think, Councilmember Core, I think, you and I was on ECDC 2 years ago when this first came about, and Councilmember Lambert, you might have been familiar with that as well too, right? So this is nothing new. And I personally have been tracking this here with Kurt, just seeing what the progress is. And I feel comfortable with our team that, they have been working with the city of Auburn for quite some time. And just like Councilmember Thomas, when we do our annexation, I mean, make no sense to us to, put in millions of dollars before they can take over. I mean, we could have done that with Panther Lake if we wanted to. We could ask that, right, from the county, right? But we didn't do that. That's just one of the things you buy as is, right? So this is something I think is it's good. I know Councilman Lumber, you also mentioned you had some friends or family that live out there, and I think they strongly support this as well too. I think you're hearing saying. So I mean, all around, I think this is a good thing. I mean, for us, and if Auburn side to come around later, so be it. But we are where we are right now, and I'm along with Councilmember Fincher for us moving this forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Boyce. Matt, did you want to say something, and then I'll move on to Councilmember Michaud?
I'm sorry for the disjointed comments. We did talk about wanting to make sure that the neighbors had plenty of chance to make their voices heard. As I said, there was the fact that this annexation effort has stalled was late breaking news. And I think there was a bit of confusion around that. Even at the hearing, the neighbors felt like it felt a little bit disjointed and a little bit confused. And so we thought, what I said at that hearing was that there would be opportunity for the neighbors to contact the Kent City Council, as they're always welcome to do regarding this matter. And what I would request, if you are to move this forward tonight, would be that you move it to other business so that we can have so that the neighbors can have an opportunity to comment on this at the March 2nd council meeting, and that would keep it off consent, and you could have a separate conversation at that time to consider those comments.
Great suggestion. Thanks, Matt. Councilmember Michaud, you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Council President. I just want to say that, yes, I support this, because if I have to choose, this is just right down the street from my house, that I would much rather have something we need like townhomes there than commercial, which would cause a bunch of traffic issues. So yes, I was just trying to figure out, hoping that we can protect the rest of this land as urban separator. And so I was just trying to figure out what all that meant and everything. So yes, I support this, and yes, we'll take the permit money. That's fine. I agree.
Thanks, Councilmember. And just something, kind of a clarifying question. Moving forward with this doesn't change the conversation that will still be had between Auburn and Kent. And also, if Auburn was to, come to us at some point and say they still wanted to have that property, going forward with this doesn't change that. Is that correct, Madam Mayor?
That is correct, Council President. So I have committed to Mayor Backus and the neighborhood when we were there on Sunday that we will continue to have these conversations. And if they find a path forward, then we're committed to continuing to work that. This doesn't end it. It's just so, and I think it's unfortunate that all of this stuff sort of happened at the same time. So there's this confusion, and I can tell you on the part of the neighbors as well, like we're not doing the annexation because of the development, or the development is happening, so we're not doing the annexation, and they just sort of have come together right around the same time. So I know that Auburn is looking for a path forward, and there are neighbors that support that. And so we will continue to work in good faith with Auburn as they look to see if that happens. I also assured the neighbors that we love that they are Kent, and that this isn't us trying to get rid of them, because I don't want anyone to think that we're not going to be providing the level of service that they deserve and that they're quite honestly paying for. Matt talked a little bit about the disappointment around the commercial, and I think what folks had in mind was maybe that coffee shop or a corner bar that they could walk to, and so there's disappointment around that. But we also did talk about that it is less traffic, right, and that it is more conducive to a neighborhood. They had concerns about, are those new neighbors going to use our trails and paths and parks, and so just like the old neighbors might use the new neighbors' paths. So that's all stuff that Oakpointe has committed to working out as we go through this multi-step process. And I do think that Brian Ross committed to that in good faith and was able to answer some of the questions. There's some pent-up issues around things that folks were promised when they bought their houses that didn't happen. And I think that there's frustration from that. There was apparently a real estate agent that said, oh, it's already a done deal that this is going to be Auburn. Well, that wasn't the case. So, and again, none of us have control over what was said. Somebody asked, one of the neighbors asked about getting a tennis court. So there's those kinds of things that will keep on, those conversations will keep on happening, and we'll keep providing the service and also engaging with Auburn as this goes forward. And finally, Councilmember Michaud, to your point, I think it will be helpful to see a map, that middle section there, and Matt touched on this several times, the critical areas piece of that, the wetland, is what prevents it from being developed. And that's not necessarily a thing that can be changed on a whim. So there is definitely a protected area there in the center because of the wetland, not necessarily that. And Councilmember Larmer, you said this, to the urban separator designation, but the wetlands are the key protector of that. So there's our commitment. And I want it to sound positive towards Auburn that we are committed to continue working because that's how we treat our neighbors.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm hearing a consensus for most everyone. Just kind of a nod your head yes or no. If we're okay with moving this to other business for the council meeting. All right, so a majority of the people, I can see you're shaking your head no, Les, but we will go ahead and move this to other business for the next, for the council meeting.
I have no problem. Excuse me.
Perfect.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you. So I think a majority of us are ready to move this to other business. And I thank you so much for this good conversation.
But I don't get to be a part of it?
Yes, I said that you were part of moving it forward. So thank you, Councilmember Thomas.
I am. I think there's a misunderstanding here about a lot of things. Satlander said something really good and I think it's where the mayor's going to is to continue to talk and work with Auburn, perhaps a little more closely than just throwing it out next week for our regular meeting, hoping that people might or might not show up. But to answer Zandria's question, from 124th, if you can imagine it, it kind of slopes downward toward that valley where that creek I was showing you was. And then the nice part about that area is they have a phenomenal view of Mount Rainier. It's just spectacular. And you're not probably going to get a 1 acre parcel there for a home because it's going to be very expensive, like Meridian Valley kind of pricing. So, and I got to say, Oak Harbor, they've done a good job. Yeah, I know my daughter's house is a nice house. They're a little bit too close together for me, but they are well built, and townhouses would be fine. But I'm like what Bill said in the beginning. I don't know why he changed his mind, but we're like playing poker here. It's like the first one to blink, and I think we're blinking a little too fast here. If Auburn really wants this, they're going to proceed and they're going to negotiate and they're going to get involved. We're just giving it to them, and I'm just going.
Councilmember Thomas, just if I can interrupt, this is just to move through an ordinance amending the comprehensive plan. It's not saying we're giving it to Auburn. This is our property in Kent, and the mayor will continue to have conversations with Auburn about
I understand
that annexation. But this is just to move through with an ordinance amending the comprehensive.
One last point, and that is what Zandria talked about. Yeah, we can have the jurisdiction over those areas. We can zone it any way we want, but if we give it to Auburn, they can turn around and do just what they want to do. So be careful here.
I think you missing the point. I think the Madam Mayor, first of all, we spent the last 18 months to 2 years talking to Auburn. She will continue talking to Auburn.
No
This
problem.
is going to happen with Kent or without Auburn. So that's the point I think you are missing.
I'm hearing it.
Well, I don't understand what you disagree.
We're going to put in $1 million to give it to Auburn.
No.
Well, that's what you're suggesting.
No, we're not. You're missing the point. No one put in.
Okay, then I'm fine with that.
Where you get that from anyway?
From you.
No, I say the city of Auburn asked us to put in $1 million before they annex the property. I think that's the mayor said the exact same thing.
Yeah, and I'd say no.
And we all say no.
We all say no, Les. So that's completely separate from this changing this comprehensive plan. So, so again, I think we have a majority of the people that are willing to move this forward to other business at the next council meeting. Okay. Is everyone okay if we move on? All right, we are going to go to item F on our agenda, which is an ordinance amending the comprehensive plan and its capital facilities element to update park project list and 2021 impact fee study. So Brian Levenhagen.
All right, thank you, Council President. Good evening, Council. Let me go ahead and share my screen. department pretty quickly and then answer questions at the end. So a park impact fee does support a number of our strategic goals, and we've had quite a bit of engagement on this. The Park and Open Space Plan 2016 recommended park impact fee as a funding source for parks capital. The Rally the Valley Plan, implementing a park impact fee, helps achieve 3 of the 4 plan goals there. The Comprehensive Recreation Program Plan had a strategy, 1B, to explore the feasibility of creating and utilizing impact fees for parks. The Parks and Rec Commission last November passed a motion supporting the establishment of a park and impact fee. I have brought this forward twice previously at workshops, and we did reach out to the Master Builders Association and NAOP, which is a Commercial Real Estate Development Association locally. So the comp plan amendment, it's required by law that we have the park project list that determines the projects that are eligible for to be paid for with a park impact fee amended into the capital facilities element of the comp plan. So that is this project list. This project list was developed based on the park CIP in the 2021-2022 adopted city budget. So this is the projects here you have seen previously. We did have to add some additional columns, which you'll see over towards the right, that speak to level of service and the additional level of service added to our park system with each project. And that's what necessitated the amendment of this project list into the comp plan. Along with the project list, we're also amending the park impact fee study, the contents of which our consultant, the FCS group, shared with you back in December at a council workshop. The information that was shared in that December meeting hasn't changed now that the park fee study was finalized. So just kind of touching on a few of the highlights of that park impact fee study. For single family, we ended up with a park impact fee of $3,281.97 per dwelling unit. For multifamily, $2,451.19 per dwelling unit. And then for various commercial industrial developments, it's based on the number of employees per square feet. So it depends on basically the different types of business for those rates. And this, you've also seen this previously, the regional comparison. Again, Kent is on the low side, but there are some reasons for that. And a lot of it has to do with kind of our current emphasis on trying to reinvest in our existing park system and complete some deferred maintenance projects with our capital budget. So this is something that we'll revisit moving forward, specifically through the park plan update that we are starting very shortly. So proposed next steps. This is the first of 2 ordinances, as I mentioned. So this would go on to City Council next week. Obviously, the second park impact fee ordinance would come to the Committee of the Whole on March 9th. And then the earliest that could be adopted would be March 16th. So that concludes my presentation. So with that, I will open it up for questions.
All right. Anyone have any questions on this? Councilmember Fincher, your hand is up, but is that from last time? Thank you. Councilmember Michaud.
Thank you, Council President. Brian, I'm ready to do this. Let's do it. Let's get it done. I support it.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember Michaud. Anybody else have any comments, questions? All right. So we have this before us to update the project park list and add the park impact fee study to the comprehensive plan. Is everyone okay with that? All right, I'm seeing nods of heads and some thumbs up. So we will go ahead and move that to the consent calendar. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to welcome Ronda Billerbeck to talk about the 2021 to 2024 City Art Plan, and this requires council action as well.
Hello, thank you, Council President Troutner and council members. I'm very happy to be here today to present to you for your approval the 2021 through 2025 City Art Plan. Okay, the presentation's already up. Great, thank you, Kim. As you probably know, the City Art Program is funded by a per capita ordinance that's been in place since 1985. This slide shows just kind of what our financial outlook is for 2021. You can see our total budget. It's a $2 per capita ordinance, so our total budget is $261,200. After we take out our amount for administrative expenses, salaries, benefits, supplies, some minor maintenance, those types of things, we have just over $100,000 remaining for new projects. We also have an amount that carries over from previously approved art plans, and that amount is $423,000. So our total anticipated expenditures that we have allocated and outlined in this plan for 2021 is $684,501. Next slide, please. So this plan is kind of organized into new projects that are proposed for funding this year. And I'll also go over projects that were approved in previous city art plans that have been carried over. So starting with new projects, this is a project we're very excited about. We're working in partnership with the Kent Downtown Partnership on implementing a rotating temporary mural program. We're going to start with 2 walls that you can see on the photos there. These murals will remain in place for a 2-year cycle, and the art will be attached to the walls using vinyl wrapped panels. This is a medium that we've been using for our traffic signal control box program, and it's been very successful. And so we're excited to use it for this project as well. The first wall, the top one, you probably recognize as the one that's kind of overlooking the Airways Brewery parking lot on Harrison Street. And then the one below is the building that sits just west of the vacant lot on 2nd and Meeker. So both of those have wall leases now. We've selected a couple of final artists, and we're hoping for installation of that in the summer of this year. So the cost for that is $34,500. Next slide, please. The next one is the Kent Valley Loop Trail. This is a system of trails of varying lengths along the Green River. And we are proposing a system of artist-designed trail markings, wayfinding, and/or interpretive signage. And you can see that we have a total cost of $60,000 for this. Only $10,000 is from the 2021 Art Fund. The rest is carried over from previous years. This has been something we've been working on with our Parks Planning and Development Division for quite some time. Just priorities have shifted over the years, but we're excited about hopefully making this happen in the coming year. Next slide, please. Kent Creates is a project that most of you are familiar with. This is a web platform that we launched in 2014. We're planning to keep it going for another round in 2021. It's a platform online where Kent residents can share art, culture, and creative endeavors. It fosters creativity and inclusiveness in our community by sharing the talent of the community. It kind of gets people involved, not just in being consumers of art, but also being creators of art themselves. We've had everything from fine art paintings and photography to people sharing recipes that they've created themselves and just lots of unique, fun things. So the cost for that is about $11,000. $4,000 of that will be from this year's City Art Fund. And then we have a fairly large chunk, $7,700, that will carry over from last year because we did not need any system maintenance or upgrades. So we have that money left from last year. Next slide. Thank you. This is a new project. You're probably aware that the Parks Planning and Development Division has been undertaking a major renovation up on the West Hill at West Fenwick Park. They're nearing completion on that. And they're installing a really fun chutes and ladders themed interactive playground. And we feel that that provides a great opportunity for a whimsical art element. You can see a photo there of the playground in progress. We've dedicated $80,000 towards that, $50,000 from this year's City Art Fund, and then $30,000 carried over from previous year. Next slide. Another new project that we're looking towards is some artwork at Chestnut Ridge Park. There's a planned renovation for this park coming up probably this year. Plans include an open lawn area that would be well suited for a sculptural art installation. We had allocated already some money last year for that, and we're just adding a little bit to it for this year. Next slide. And then, of course, continuing our very popular traffic signal control box art wrap program. We launched this in 2017. It defers graffiti and brings kind of a fun and colorful aesthetic to intersections throughout the community. We have budgeted for 8 new boxes to be added this year. We currently have 21, so the 8 will be added to that. And we are carrying this full amount over from last year's city art plan. We had planned to do it last year, and then we're kind of sidetracked by all the chaos that the pandemic brought, so we were not able to do it last year. Next slide. We also have an amount carrying over from last year for collection, maintenance, and programming. We do have a fairly large collection of public art, and as you might imagine, that creates life cycle issues, just like buildings and other things we have out in our parks. These artworks age and require maintenance from time to time. So we have a big focus on sustaining our existing assets. And one of the big projects that we will undertake in 2021 is restoration of the Another Place, Another Time Plaza at the Kent Historical Museum. That project honors the history of Japanese Americans in the Kent Valley. And so we're excited to get that spiffed up and looking great again. Next slide. We also maintain an opportunity fund as part of the city art plan. We use this fund to identify and implement art projects to address various city needs and community goals. Lots of times things come up throughout the year that we couldn't have anticipated, capital projects, strategic art acquisitions, projects that we can partner with our economic development folks and address those issues. So that's what this is for. We're carrying over $65,000 from last year's city art plan, and then we're reassigning $120,000 from the 4th and Willis Gateway project. We had originally assigned a pretty large chunk of money to that. And then as it progressed forward, we took a look at it and decided that it really already has a lot of visual interest in the vertical elements that are part of that roundabout. And so we shifted our art budget away from that. Next slide. We also still have a small amount of money, $15,000, that is in the budget for a downtown art plan and activation activities. This is something that we were embracing and working on right when the pandemic hit. We were working with a consultant, and we were hoping to start gathering community input to help us create an inclusive plan for art and culture in downtown Kent. That clearly has kind of been put on hold. It's been difficult to assemble and convene people, and folks have just had a lot of other priorities on their minds. So that's something that we hope to take back again as we get back to some degree of normal. Next slide. So this is, we put together a pretty specific 1-year city art plan, and then we also project 4 years out from that. So this is the next 4 years of projected projects. You can see it's obviously a lot less specific as we go into the future, but it kind of gives an idea of just how we see allocating that $2 per capita money into the future. You'll notice that we're planning on continuing some of our popular projects like the traffic signal control box and the new downtown mural program. We're doing both of those in 2021, but then the hope is to alternate years on those starting in 2022. We've got some anticipated potential big capital projects, perhaps at Van Doren's Landing and maybe at the First Avenue Pocket Park down off of First Avenue. And keeping money in our opportunity fund to see, what projects come up in the future. And I believe that brings us to the end. Anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Ronda. Councilmember Core, followed by Councilmember Larmer.
Thank you, Rhonda, for this presentation. I'm always excited to see what's happening in Kent. Couple of questions, I guess. Just one. I'm excited to see the West Fenwick Park. Do you have like a timeline on when it'll be complete, possibly?
I don't. I know our parks planning and development crew probably has a more clear idea of when it will be done and be open. So off the top of my head, I don't know, but it certainly, I think it's getting close.
Thank you. And I'm just, and the mural project rotating, do we have artists selected for that already?
We do. We just do. Actually, the Arts Commission voted to allocate some of the opportunity funds from 2020 late last fall to get this project started. So we put a call out to artists in Washington State working in any medium that could be translated into a mural. And we had 54, well, we actually had 66 applications, but some of them were not from Washington State, so they were disqualified. We had 54 applications from Washington State artists. We had a really, really strong pool of artists, and we had a panel of 6 people. Councilmember Fincher was the council member representative on that panel. We had one of the property owners was on the panel, a professional artist, some arts commissioners, and they reviewed all those applications. And through a couple of rounds of judging and discussion, did settle in on 2 artists that we're working on getting under contract at this time.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Councilmember Michaud, followed by Councilmember Boyce.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you for this presentation, Rhonda. I'm wondering, do we have a map of where the utility boxes are?
We do. We actually have a GIS map of our entire public art collection, and it's on our website at kentarts.com, or you can navigate to the Parks Department and then to Arts, and you'll see a public art map, and it kind of classifies things by East Hill, West Hill, and downtown, and it has little thumbnail pictures of all of them, and it ties to a map, so you can see our whole public art collection there, including the traffic boxes.
Awesome, thank you.
Councilmember Larmer, I see you have your hand back up, and I missed you before, but
no, you actually didn't miss me. Councilmember Core asked my question, but then I just had a new one based on what was said. So do you want me to go ahead, or should we go back in order with
Councilmember Boyce? Then we'll come back to you, Councilmember Larmer. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, could we go back to the first page that show your budget? And first of all, Ron, you're doing a phenomenal job. I really appreciate you in helping support our vision to help beautify the city of Kent. So thank you very much. I look at your budget. You got 261, which is $2 per capita, and then you have your expense, and then your remaining for new projects. So your total expense for 2021 is $684. So you're pretty much spending everything, right? So when 2022 come, so that means you're only gonna have just a 261. If I'm looking at that correctly.
Excuse me. Stuff always ends up getting carried over. Okay. So I always budget to show how we'll use all of it, or sort of where we're projecting to use all of it. We will definitely not spend all $684,000 in 2021. And remember, a big chunk of that is an opportunity fund as well, that really is just there for things that come up.
Good. Hey, once again, thanks for doing your part and help beautifying the city to help our goal, vision, and mission. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Councilmember Larmer.
Yeah, so the question that came up for me, or I guess maybe it's more of a comment, is, Rhonda, when you were showing the kentarts.com website, I feel like that's, I know about it, I think, really just because of my role on council, but I think it's something that I think would like to see communicated more. And I know that, Bailey in communications has put together, some different campaigns. And I'd like to see us, be a little bit more robust in our communication on what we do in the public arts realm for our residents. So just a suggestion that maybe we can coordinate and get some, feature on our social media and other channels for these programs. Because I think, public art is important. It is lasting form of beautification, and I just think we should promote it more. So thank you.
Yeah, well, it's one of the things that people can do right now. Obviously our performances and things are kind of shut down right now. People can get out and see the public art. We have been putting in each issue, or maybe every other issue of our Parks and Recreation e-newsletter, we've been including a feature on a piece of public art, just kind of encouraging people to get out and see. But yeah, I absolutely would welcome, a chance to partner with our communications folks to get the word out.
Thank you. Councilmember Fincher.
Thank you. I've given, kudos out to the Parks Department and the Arts Department within the parks. But I just want to reiterate that, Ronda, I believe there's only 2 of you who work full time for the arts department, but they've done, I'll go with Councilmember Boyce's word, a phenomenal job with what they've had. You'll notice there's a lot of funds carried over. There was a huge reduction in what was put forth this year, but they still managed to serve a lot of people on a small amount of dollars. And that includes concerts. And just to put in a plug, we have 2 upcoming concerts on the books that hopefully folks will tune into. But just kudos to the work that's been done for the commission, for the department. Well done.
Thanks, Brendan.
And Brian, do you have anything you wanted to add about any of these projects?
I did want to just jump in and answer the West Fenwick question. We're getting towards the end of construction. We're expecting it to finish up by the end of March, maybe early April. We're going to delay the formal grand opening till later in the spring. We have a lot of sod and new grass out at the park, and a brand new play field. So we're going to make sure that establishes and that's all open before we do a formal grand opening. So it's coming along. It's been a really exciting project. I know everyone's really excited to see it open, and Ronda, the sneak peek of the playground, it's really looks amazing. So I just want to share that.
Thanks, Brian. I was hoping you had the answer to that question. And then, so as far as the timeline for the art, that will obviously come after the park is opened back up. It'll just be a matter of us kind of managing our priorities and our capacity within our department, which, as Brendan mentioned, is a little bit limited. So we have to work really carefully to line our projects up in an order that we can handle them.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rhonda. I am so happy to support this plan. So many great projects. And I just want to see how my council members are as far as moving this plan forward to the consent calendar. I'm pretty sure I'm getting thumbs up from everybody. So great job. Thank you so much, Rhonda. Really appreciate it. All right, moving on to the King County Veterans Seniors and Human Services Levy Agreement, which also requires action.
Good evening, Council President and Council members. I'm Lori Hogan. I'm with the Recreation and Cultural Services Division within the Parks Department. I'm seeking your approval tonight to extend the King County Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services Levy Agreement. You'll recall last January that you approved a 5-year levy award in the amount of $1,403,689, and it was started in late 2019, and it was intended to be extended through 2023. This was initially going to be an annual extension, and King County has now decided to roll all of the remaining years into a single agreement. And so tonight I'm asking you to accept that 3-year agreement extension in the amount of $893,471. That's to be split into approximately thirds over the remaining 3 years. You've got the agreement in your packets, I'm sure, but some of the goals within levy funding included the creation of an inclusive senior hub for Kent, while also working in tandem with other senior hubs across the county in order to provide local and regional services. The idea is to extend those dollars across the region without duplicating services. And I think we've made a great start on that so far. We also were intending to engage seniors in activities that promote healthy aging, to enable access to resources that support seniors to live in the communities of their choice, to expand outreach to isolated seniors. As I'm sure you know, this is one of the greatest challenges facing seniors today. And so we're doing everything within our power to make sure that anyone who is living alone or feels like they're living alone has a way to engage with our senior center and senior center staff. We are supporting cultural community partnerships through the engagement with diverse communities across Kent. And we're also doing some one-time senior center facility improvements and enhancements. The levy funding also provided us an opportunity to hire 2 new employees that would join existing staff at the senior center. It was intended to be a senior center outreach coordinator and a center program assistant. These 2 positions are full-time employees. Also important to know that they are limited term staff, funded 100% by VSHS funding. A piece that I'm sure you're aware of, but it's important to call out that as a result of the budget challenges related to COVID last May, rather than adding staff, we opted to shift one of our existing coordinators and one of our administrative support staff into the levy funding from the general fund. And so that didn't allow us an opportunity to necessarily grow programs in an extensive way, but it has helped us maintain our budget position, and they're doing an excellent job carrying out some of the levy programming. We've also just embarked on a senior program needs assessment, and through community stakeholders, senior participants, care providers, elected leadership, and other interested persons across the community, we'll be capturing, under the guidance of a contracted group that's carrying this out for us. We'll be gathering feedback and guidance about current programming and service offerings, and we'll hopefully be taking away what the community wants and needs, as well as identifying and validating what we're already doing in terms of outreach and programming. So what has the senior center staff done with the money so far? Well, we just barely got started last year when COVID hit. And that meant that staff essentially had to reinvent themselves, not just within the senior program area, but across the department. And I'm really delighted to share with you that staff has gotten creative, and we've been very successful in rolling out some of the levy goals that I've described for you tonight. Programming is more important during this pandemic than ever before, and we've tried to focus on mental health and wellness. That's coming out in terms of programming in the form of virtual counseling. Those are one-on-one and group sessions through Valley City's mental health. We've got a variety of virtual fitness programs underway. We've created some drive-through events so people can make safe connections with senior staff, and it's amazing how welcoming the seniors are for that opportunity to come down and say hi and see people. We've also gotten in place some one-on-one personal care services. Those are the only things that are currently going on in person at the senior center. That includes things like dental care and foot care that are held on an appointment basis. Center staff, with the support of an incredible group of volunteers, has continued meal distribution. That comes in the form of Meals on Wheels program. I'm really excited to share that Kent has the largest Meals on Wheels program in King County. And in addition to Meals on Wheels that are delivered twice monthly, the staff also provides COVID relief bags with those meals to make sure that homebound seniors have all of the things they need to stay safe and cared for. We've also carried out some building improvements across the center, some touchless entryways, some restroom upgrades, and a variety of other things that will make the building aesthetically improved as well as safer when the seniors return to the center. So that concludes my remarks. I'd be delighted to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Lori, for that information and update. Anyone have questions or comments about this? All right, so before us, we have the King County Veteran Senior and Human Service Levy Agreement. Is everyone okay moving this forward to the consent calendar? All right, wonderful. We will move that forward to the consent calendar. Thank you so much, Lori.
Thank you very much.
Okay, up next, we have a Highway Traffic Safety Improvement Program on 108th Avenue Southeast and Southeast 264th Street, Compact Roundabout Grant. And this requires action. And Eric, are you going to do both of these or all of these separately, or do you want us to take one at a time?
No, we do need to take one at a time.
Perfect.
Yep. So yes, my name is Eric Preston. I'm the city traffic engineer, and I am really excited to ask for your acceptance for a total of $1.6 million in grant awards on these two projects for only $30,000 in match. So the first HSIP grant would be a compact roundabout at 108th Avenue Southeast and Southeast 264th. And we got this grant award letter from WashDOT back in December. So what is the HSIP grant? It is a federal money that is administered by WashDOT, and WashDOT requires a local road safety plan for these grant applications, and that safety plan looks at fatal and serious injury crashes over the last 5 years. Then WashDOT takes that local road safety plan and they select projects, both spot locations and other citywide or systemic projects that can be applied more broadly. And so this is a map of that location, 108th Avenue Southeast and Southeast 264th. It's located on the East Hill between Kent Kangley and Southeast 277th Street, and just a little bit east of Target, about a quarter mile. So it's right there on the East Hill. And so you might be asking, well, why this location? And remember that WashDOT chooses the location of the projects based on what they see in the local road safety plan. And so there was a serious injury crash here in 2016. The project is in the local road safety plan. As you can see on the map, there is a walkway to the east that connects to the back of some neighborhoods, and that walkway is used for students that walk to the high school, to Kent Meridian High. But currently there's no pedestrian crossing. There's limited connectivity in the area, and a roundabout here would, in addition to providing a great intersection for vehicles, would also provide a great crossing opportunity for pedestrians in that area. And so you might be asking, well, why a compact roundabout? Well, roundabouts significantly reduce severity of crashes, and they've been shown to have significant risk reduction, especially with fatal and serious injury crashes. They reduce conflicts by simplifying the intersection. They also have a calming effect because they require every vehicle to slow down to navigate the intersection. And compact roundabouts are compact. They're smaller than a typical roundabout, typically 60 to 90 feet wide, and only a single lane. Other single lane roundabouts with landscaping and things in the middle are between 100 and 130 feet typically. Just for comparison, the new roundabout at 4th and Willis is 160 feet in diameter. So this one would be approximately half the size. And so what is a compact roundabout? What you see there on the screen is the intersection of Military Road and South 298. So this is a roundabout I helped build while I was working for the city of Federal Way several years ago. Military Road in that area has a posted speed limit of 40 miles per hour. So as you can see, it's a single lane. There is no landscaping. All of the islands are mountable, including the center island there, which is that kind of a brick red color. They have 3 to 4 inch curbs, which are mountable by large trucks and fire trucks and other large vehicles. And as I mentioned, they have a smaller diameter. This particular one is 85 feet in diameter, and I'd probably expect something similar at the intersection of 108th and 264th. And so what does it cost? Well, the project estimate is for $900,000, and the grant award would be for $885,000. A 10% match is required for the design and right-of-way phase, and we're anticipating that would be a $15,000 match. Now, a 10% match is also required for construction. However, that will be waived if the construction funding is obligated by April of 2023. And our goal is to have that obligated next year in 2022. So we should not have much, any problems in meeting that schedule. So here's that vicinity map, and I'm available for questions.
Thanks, Eric. I am going to start. Councilmember Fincher, is your hand up? All right.
I do have a question. Thank you.
Okay.
So you're feeling pretty good about having all of that next year? All of that, the money that's needed?
Well, it would definitely be designed and ready for construction. And so the washout requires that the money is obligated by that day, meaning that we've selected a contractor by April 2023. So that shouldn't be a problem.
Thank you.
Councilmember Thomas, followed by Councilmember Larmer.
Thank you, Council President. So I guess the question is, from an RFA standpoint, can we get the fire truck with the extension, the ladder truck in there? Can it go around, or does it have to go over the curbs? Is that what you were saying?
Yes, the larger vehicles may have to use that, go over the apron. Probably only the inside wheel of the back half of that vehicle. Yes.
All right. And then just a minor correction in your presentation, which was a good presentation, but that pathway there from 264th is not to Kent Meridian. It's to what we used to call Sequoia Middle School, now known as Phoenix Academy.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I probably misspoke. I meant to say that students walk through there from the neighborhood to get to Kent Meridian, which is quite a ways away.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Go the other direction.
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
okay. I see. Yes.
Yeah, it's on the walking route.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Larmer.
Thank you, Council President. So I have a question. When you were showing the roundabout that you worked on in Federal Way, are we suggesting the same aesthetic for this one? Where I guess my thought is just that center island is really plain. It seems to me like it couldn't cost that much to just put in some low maintenance, shrubbery. I think it would probably, if we're talking about just the back tire of the fire trucks needing to go up on the curb, it just seems like we could have something in the center.
Well, and I think once we get into design, we might be able to confirm that. But typically with the roundabout this size, virtually all of that needs to be available for a large vehicle to make a left turn. Since we have Target so close and Home Depot and other large trucks, might need to, semi trucks, for instance, the truck could follow through the lane, but the trailer itself would probably need the entire island.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
But if you're willing to do some artwork in there to spiff it up, then that's fine with me.
As long as the trucks wouldn't destroy it.
All right. Any other questions or comments about this?
Right there, this Home Depot, Target, right there on 108th and 264.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So
I want to make sure I did this right.
Councilmember Thomas, do you have a question? You were unmuted.
Was it blue? What's that? Uh-oh.
You're unmuted, Councilmember. Thank you. All right. So before us, we have the authorization for the roundabout at 108th and 264th. Is everyone okay accepting this grant money and moving forward? All right, great job, Eric. Let's move on to the next one, and we'll move that in particular to consent.
Right. So this project, also HSIP, would be for 3 city safety road diets throughout the city. We also received this grant award letter from WSDOT on December 23rd of 2020. And so here you can see the map of the 3 corridors shown in orange. And so I'll start left to right. Over there on the West Hill, you see 260th and 259th Place from Pacific Highway SR 99 to Military Road. That's about 0.8 of a mile. Then if you go downtown, on the right side of the screen, you'll see Meeker, Lincoln, and Smith between Washington Avenue, SR 181, and 4th Avenue North in the downtown core. So that one is just a little over half a mile. And that one would integrate into the Meet Me on Meeker plan. And then just above that is 4th Avenue North between South 228th Street and West James Street, which would connect our downtown to the Industrial Valley. And that one is about 3/4 of a mile. So you might be asking, what is a road diet? And really, it's just a different way to stripe the same road. And so we have several streets here in Kent that look like that before picture, where we have 4 lanes, 2 in each direction. But a road diet would convert that, would restripe it to 3 lanes plus bike lanes. And so that's what would be happening on that section of Meeker, Lincoln, and Smith, and also on 4th Avenue. Up on the West Hill with 260th and 259th, it's the same width as that before scenario, but there's only 2 lanes striped. And so we go from two lanes to 3 plus bike on the West Hill. And another, kind of wire road diets, they're very safe, and they're also very cost effective since we're just restriping the existing roadway. And so really a road diet, they reduce the number of conflict points, reduce the number and severity of crashes. They improve visibility for pedestrians, cyclists, and other vehicles, especially for left turning traffic. Going from 2 lanes in each direction to 1 lane in each direction forces traffic to slow down, so that your flow becomes more uniform with only 1 lane in each direction. And it also creates space for bikes. So what does it cost? The estimate is $750,000 total for those 3 projects. So the grant award would be for the amount of $735,000, and again, a 10% match of $15,000 would be required. And the 10% match for construction would also be required, but would also be waived if we are obligated by April of 2023. So, and again, for our schedule would be similar for this project. We would hope to have that obligated in 2022. So here's the map again of those corridors, and I am available to answer questions.
Wow, great. Any questions or comments about this project? Councilmember Fincher.
When construction actually begins, would you have construction going on at all 3? Would it run concurrently, or would you do one, then move to the next one and the next one?
I really don't have the answer to that. I think our construction team would probably figure that out, whichever way was best. You could probably do it either way, and it somewhat would depend on our contractor and what they were able to achieve.
And the length of time that's probably a question for the construction crew too. How long it would the construction take, the painting and all?
Sure. You're right. It is a good question for them. It doesn't take too long to remove striping and then put it back, if that's what you're looking for.
All right, any other questions or comments? Gosh, another great project with wonderful use of grant funds that goes a long way. Anyone, is everyone okay moving this forward to the consent calendar? All right, we will move that forward to consent. Thank you, Eric. And now we're going to have one more presentation on information only on the residential traffic calming program, an update.
Yes, so this is the semi-annual update for the RTCP. So that's my picture on top, and underneath is Maria. She's brand new to our team. She's been with us about 1 month. She just came over to us from the city of Boston. So in the future, she will be running the program, and you'll probably see her give you these updates. So we're very excited to have her on the team. Yeah, the RTCP is, we revised this last summer, approved June 2nd. The new program is shorter and simpler. The process that it goes through, it considers other factors besides speed, including the livability of the neighborhood, and it uses a points system. So just to give you a program status, looking, compared to past years, obviously COVID-19 had a huge impact. We saw a large increase in requests beginning in February and March when people were forced to be home. And we had 25 in the first 6 months, which was a new record. And the total for the year last year was 44, which is also a new record and double what we had the previous year in 2019. The yellow cells are just highlighting months that we tied or set records for the number of requests in that month. So this map is a map of all the requests that we've received since 2018. And the brown ones are, I know this is hard to read in any detail. The red ones, the brown ones have been closed out. The blue ones are either a waiting study or just haven't been closed out yet. We've made a lot of progress in the last little bit, so this is not completely updated. But most of those are ready to close out or have been evaluated. Green shows ones that action is not warranted or did not meet the speed threshold. Purple is where action is warranted. They did meet the speed threshold or they did score more than 50 points in the new program. And so there are 20 locations above the speed threshold or that scored 50 points, and I'll get into some more detail on those later. And right now we are down to only 12 locations that are awaiting speed studies. So next slide. So obviously the abnormal low traffic volumes that we saw back last year between March and July of 2020 didn't allow us to conduct traffic studies for those 5 to 6 months. In August, we felt that traffic volumes had mostly recovered or at least stabilized at a new normal. And but first we had to do some accounts for the transportation master plan update. So we started those in August, and then because we used the same equipment, we weren't able to do traffic calming studies until November. But that time did allow us to reevaluate recent studies since January of 2019. And so since the last update that I came to you with in July, we received 19 new requests. We've completed 20 studies since November when we started counting traffic calming studies. We have 5 studies currently underway in the city. So if you drive around, you might see some of those tubes on the ground. We have 12 studies pending. 2 of those came before the new program. 10 of them have come since the new program. We've evaluated 49 studies, but that means we've scored them under the new program, and 13 studies have qualified. And we recently constructed 1 project. So we're the ones who get really excited about bumps in the road, okay? That's what this slide is about. So we have 7 requests that have qualified under the old program, and so they automatically qualify under the new program. So we'll be taking those forward in the public process soon. And those 13 new requests that qualified, they did score more than 50 points. And we have 4 studies that scored close to 50 points. So we're going to recount those just to make sure we don't miss something. So this is the map of the 20 requests that we will be moving forward with in the public process. So the 7 blue studies that you see, blue means something different on this map. These met the speed threshold under the old phase 1. And so they automatically qualify for the new program. So we're going to start the public process with these ones first. The 13 magenta colored ones, they qualified by scoring 50 or more points under the new program. And so we'll also be moving forward with those as well very soon. So because of social distancing requirements, this will pose a challenge to our typical neighborhood meetings in a elementary school or library, but we will be sending out neighborhood meetings, mailings with Zoom meeting information that can be accessed by computer or over the phone. We hope to gather consensus, but or at least a sense of the most popular ideas, in each neighborhood, and then develop a plan for that neighborhood. Then the neighborhood votes on the plan with mail-in ballots. We did finish construction on one project here on 98th Avenue South. This is on the East Hill between 240th and 248th. And it actually skirts the backside of East Hill Elementary there on 98th Avenue South. So there are 4 speed cushions and 1 raised crosswalk, which you can see here in the picture. So those marks that you see are the temporary markings while the asphalt cures before we put on the permanent markings. So the project we have planned for construction this year is Hazel Avenue North. This is between James and Smith. That one would receive 3 speed cushions and is projected to be completed this summer during the overlay. So I am, excited about the program, excited to be fully staffed, and looking forward to making some progress. So I'm available for questions.
Great job, Eric. Anybody have questions about this project? All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to future updates. All right, we are going to move on to item L. If you are keeping track of the alphabet, it is an ordinance amending the comprehensive plan capital facilities and transportation elements transportation master plan, which requires action. And April, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It is my pleasure to be giving the final presentation on the Transportation Master Plan update. So Councilmember Boyce, you finally get to adopt now. Next slide, please. So the document should have been sent out in the packet. There are 7 chapters and multiple technical appendices. I'm going to go through kind of a high level of each of the chapters and the focus. Next slide, please. So the first chapter is really about setting the baseline. It's understanding the demographics and the existing land use, the planning context, Kent profile, and some of the planning requirements. Next slide, please. So that includes things like the demographics are language spoken at home, race and income, as well as looking at the different plans that went into formulating those projects that came out on the project list. Next slide, please. The next chapter is the transportation planning context. This is about understanding the needs of the different networks, automobile and freight, walking and bicycling, as well as transit, looking at safety and understanding that, the opportunities and challenges, and most importantly, the transportation equity. Next slide, please. So existing conditions is really about understanding where we're at and what is missing. So looking at the gaps as well. Next slide, please. It is also about understanding the opportunities and challenges. And this exercise, looking at opportunities and challenges, is one of the things that fed into those transportation goals that were adopted. Next slide, please. Transportation equity was one of the things that was incredibly important as we were formulating starting the updated Transportation Master Plan. And we looked at, with staff and working with the Cultural Communities Board, understand and set a baseline kind of transportation equity definition. This required input from multiple city departments as well as from the Cultural Community Board members. Additionally, as we started looking through the plan, we looked at understanding the baseline, so where equity populations lived. We looked to incorporate equity into the performance measures so that we could understand and ensure that projects were prioritized that serve those populations. We looked at conducting equitable public outreach. And our last step that is ongoing is tracking our progress towards those equity goals. Next slide, please. Next chapter documents our public outreach effort. They fell into roughly 2 buckets. First one was pre-COVID. So we had, next slide, please. We had lots of outreach events. We had targeted equity population events at the library, including things like citizenship classes and English as a second language story hours and things of that nature. This included the goals survey, as well as a project idea roadmap, where the goal really was to hear everything and anything from the public in terms of transportation projects they wanted to see in their area and across the city of Kent. Next slide, please. Phase 2, we had to get a little bit creative. COVID has made outreach challenging as in many different areas, but I feel like the outreach in phase 2 really did go beyond. We did a lot of outreach, and we really emphasized partnerships and understanding and reaching out to neighborhood councils and to different equity nonprofits, reaching out to King County Metro and community organizations to try to get the word out about the project list so we can get reactions and to get that survey and that web map. Next slide, please. The 4th chapter documents the transportation goals, policies, and actions, as well as the project evaluation criteria that was used to understand what projects we should be putting on that prioritized project list for funding over the next 20 years. Next slide, please. The 5 goals are connectivity and options, safety and health, stewardship, placemaking, and strategy. This is our north arrow. This is how we progressed and how we understood what the vision for the next 20 years is. And this fed into multiple processes, including the performance measures to understand which projects should be prioritized, and feeding all the way through to making sure that we are measuring the right things on understanding how we're progressing in those transportation overall systematic performance metrics. Next slide, please. The policies and actions. The policies are a deliberate system of principles. They guide our decisions and help us understand the intent. A lot of the policies are ones that kind of guide the direction when we don't necessarily have a path. Additionally, there's requirements from the county as well as a region of incorporating policies that reflect, that are pushed down into our plan. The actions, there are actionable things. They're the things that define the steps and the processes that we need to develop to make sure that we're doing our part in order to reach the vision for the next 20 years. Next slide, please. The project evaluation criteria, these are the ones we developed with staff, and they also went to the Transportation Advisory Board so that we could have an understanding in a quantitative way which projects did the most and should be included in those prioritized project lists that we've seen. Next slide. Next up is the transportation vision. Next slide, please. So this is where we talk about our layered network and understanding which types of facilities, whether bicycle, pedestrian, transit, and where they are most important in the different corridors across the city. We have some roadways in the city of Kent that we really do need to do everything. And we have other roadways where it makes the most sense to prioritize one mode or another. By doing this layered network approach, it helped us understand where these corridors were and what that major intent and which mode we needed to design for and think of projects for. Next slide, please. This is also where we talk about our level of service standards. This is our vision for how a transportation system works. In many ways, it's our promise as we move forward of how we want to ensure that each mode can function and reach the important destinations and from origins across the city of Kent. Next slide, please. The next up, this is the transportation policy project list. This is the traditional thing that you think about when you think of a transportation master plan. This is what we want to build over the next 20 years and our pathway forward. Next slide, please. Project development was a very long and kind of process that we made sure to embed public outreach in 3 different locations. Those are denoted by the green stars. We also had extensive interdepartmental coordination to first come up with projects and the different sources, including one from the public, to understand and review that expanded our prioritized list so that we were making sure we were taking into consideration all of the project ideas from all of the sources. From there, We looked at prioritizing that list based on those performance measures, project performance measures. And then we had to refine that project list. Some of the projects on there were not as defined to have us understanding, so we could start putting cost estimates. And finally, the difficult part, we went to public outreach to understand what projects from that prioritized project list really did the most to meet our goals and what the public really wanted to see us include in the project list. The difficult part is we looked at funding and opportunity constraints at the same time to understand what we can afford over the next 20 years so that we're being smart as we move forward. And that resulted in the prioritized project list. Next slide, please. One of the important factors as we move through this is making sure that we were developing a project list that was reflective of the needs of each area of the city. For ease, for the most part, most of the areas of the city was split up based on topography as well as the nature. So downtown and the industrial valley were split apart since they serve different uses. Next slide, please. The constrained project list are what we intend to have built over the next 20 years. This includes that prioritized project list that I have referenced, the secured funding. These are ones that we've secured funding, but we haven't quite got building it yet. And the developer load projects, the ones we anticipate being built over the next 20 years from developers. Next slide, please. Altogether, this project list, the constrained project list, is just over $299 million. Next slide, please. The project list is extremely multimodal, and that was in the intent. As we heard project ideas, we heard many ideas for different modes, including crossings and converting roadways to 3 lanes to increase capacity. We heard maintenance. We heard bicycle and pedestrian. Next slide, please. We also heard some things that were a little bit different. So we heard a lot about crossing improvements for pedestrians. We also heard a surprising amount of making sure that we're using our system that is already in place and optimizing it. So we had a lot of comments about traffic signal optimization from the public, making sure that the signals are talking to each other and moving traffic in an efficient way. Next slide, please. We also looked at a couple of programs. The prioritized project list has multiple programs. 2 of those programs point to our project list, the Safe Routes to School project list and the Greenways project list. The Safe Routes to School project list is based on what we heard from the public, but critically, it's what we heard from the school districts. This is our initial foray, and one of the important pieces that we weren't able to do in this plan is to prioritize those projects. So one of the next steps and actions, as I mentioned earlier, is coming up with a prioritization program to figure out which one of these are going to be built first with the program money that is currently on the prioritized project list. For the neighborhood greenways, it is a similar case. We heard a lot of information about needs for kind of low volume residential streets to make sure that they really were focused on bicyclists and pedestrians, but we didn't have a way to inclusively look at the entire city. So we have a greenways plan on the prioritized project list to identify a citywide greenways project list, and then also looking at prioritizing that list. Next slide, please. We heard a lot of great ideas, and unfortunately didn't have enough money in the capital budget to fund them all. However, that doesn't make them not great ideas. So one of the things that was important to make sure we document and keep these kind of in the pipeline. If additional funding is identified or we have higher than expected funding, we can start plugging these in so that we can start putting them into the prioritized list. Next slide, please. Finally is implementation. Next slide, please. Implementation is split into 2 sections. One is maintenance and operations. It's the behind the scenes, things like overlays, updating curb ramps, those kind of things. This is things that happen every year that kind of go behind the scenes for our public works operations staff. Next slide, please. The 20-year capital budget has 4 primary sources: the B&O tax, grants and appropriations from the legislative primarily, transportation impact fees, and local improvement districts or LIDs. Next slide, please. In order to understand what the next 20 years would look like, we looked at 4 years of funding from these sources and average to understand about how much we could anticipate for capital projects looking forward. Next slide, please. This is the breakdown of the percent of the budget for each of those. Next slide, please. These numbers were used to understand and look forward and plan a budget for 20 years for capital projects to build that long-term vision for transportation in the city of Kent. Next slide, please. And this is a breakdown of those by source. Next slide, please. Finally, system-wide plan performance measures is an important component of understanding how we're doing and gauging progress. We're working with an interdepartmental team right now to come up with those measures, and you'll be getting an update of that during the Transportation Improvement Program annual updates process. Next slide, please. Finally, there is a lot of appendixes associated with this. The intent of the plan was to make sure it was as approachable as possible and was not 2 inches thick. It was very feasible. We could have made it 2 inches thick. So some of the technical documentation that supports the plan elements in the different chapters are included in this appendix. Next slide, please. Final steps. So from here, it should be going to the consent agenda for adoption. After that, we may have small updates for the TMP, but it really does move into the Transportation Improvement Program, which is our short year, 6-year planning process. And I can take any questions.
Wow, amazing job, April. I knew Councilmember Boyce would raise his hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't really have a question, but I tell you, I just have a lot of appreciation what goes on in the city, right? You know, there's a lot of things that goes on, and each piece of the puzzle really what makes up the city. And I talk about swimming in a different swim lane. I'm not sure I can swim in this swim lane, April, so I have a lot of appreciation for you and your team, and I'm glad we are at the final point. And just kudos to you and the team, and thanks for all the presentation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well said, Councilmember Boyce. Anybody have any questions or comments about this? Amazing job again, April. So much work has gone into this and so much input from the community. And you guys did a fabulous job gathering all that information. So I am super happy to support this.
Yep.
Just looking to the rest of my colleagues to make sure everyone is good with moving this forward to the consent calendar.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you, April. We will move that to the consent calendar, and next you will share information on the transportation impact fees.
So as part of the TMP update, it was important to update our transportation impact fee program to reflect the new, more multimodal transportation project list. And one note, also on the call with me is Kendra Breland with Fair and Peers. She'll be supporting me on this presentation. Next slide, please. First, I want to go over the timeline for this. The current and proposed assumptions that you've seen before. I'm just going to go over those quickly and then give you some of the maximum transportation impact fee and the transportation impact fee scenarios that we have gone through as staff. Next slide. So we started talking about transportation impact fees with the staff working group, the interdepartmental group, on August 31st. And we've had 2 additional workshops that coincide roughly with after I've given a presentation to council to update and get a direction for where to move next. Well, there was a land use and planning board hearing last night. It passed unanimously. I'm presenting today. My goal for today is to understand what percent of the maximum defensible rate that you would like to move forward. This will go to action on March 9th and then adopt via consent agenda on March 16th. Next slide, please. So first up, the current and proposed TIF assumptions. Next slide. So currently our program is based on PM peak hour vehicle trips. Additionally, select land uses within downtown qualify for a reduction based on their use. There varying levels depending on the land use. As required by state law, a developer can submit a justification for a decreased fee. And a big note is the ITU Trip Generation Handbook 8th edition was used. And to kind of ground you on the amount, the impact fee currently in place is $5,381.98 per PM peak vehicle and trip. Next slide, please. The proposed trip proposes to go to PM peak hour person trips as reflective of our multimodal transportation project list. The proposal is to add a reduction for Midway. This is based on the coming of the Federal Link extension. This would exclude land uses that primarily are oriented to industrial uses or auto-oriented. For industrial uses, the fee rates will recognize the share of large trucks and their impact on our streets and infrastructure as required by state law. Again, the developer can submit a justification. There was 4 sources for this: the 10th edition of the Trip Generation Handbook. Additionally, and this is the Institute of Transportation Engineers, the Trip Generation Appendix that looks at truck trips only, a survey that's conducted by PSRC, and we looked at surveys from Kent, Bellevue, Tacoma, and Tukwila, as well as a specialized tool from Fair and Peers. Next slide, please. And I'm going to have Kendra present the methodology.
Great. Well, thank you, April. So council members, good evening. Kendra Braylon, Fair and Peers. Just to kind of share kind of our methodology, how we got from a list of projects within the TMP to a recommended rate for at least a recommended maximum rate for your impact fee program. Just wanted to share the process that we went through. It is prescribed by state law. So first kind of step that we took was to look through the TMP and the projects within the TMP prioritized project list that would be eligible for inclusion in an impact fee program. The next step we did was to kind of look at those projects, identify kind of the portion of those projects that were related to providing capacity to accommodate future growth. And then from that kind of step and some modeling procedures that we took, which again really do follow state law, we were able to identify kind of eligible costs and normalize that by kind of the growth in trips in Kent. So a basic tenet of impact fees are that we charge rates that are fair across land uses, across places in the city. So this is the process that we took to arrive at a cost per person trip. Back to you, April.
Perfect. Next slide, please. So looking at our summary, we have 96 projects on our prioritized project list. The total project cost is just under $254 million. Of these 96 projects, 50 are eligible for impact fees, and just under $228 million of the dollars on the list is eligible. Going through that methodology that Kendra just explained, not just over $98 million in impact fee cost, and looking at kind of the number and the growth in person trip ends is $15,714, and the maximum allowable cost per trip is $6,254.63. Next slide, please. So we worked through, as I said, 3 interdepartmental workshops to work through different ideas. We looked at the land use categories. One big note is that between the 8th and 10th edition, some of them did change or even eliminated. We refined the sub areas for those rate adjustments I referenced, the conversion from vehicle trip rates to person trip rates, and then calculating those adjustments. Next slide, please. So looking at our current 2021 land use table and TIF table. So a couple of big things. We have 40 plus land use categories. We updated to the ITE, and as I mentioned, some things changed. Some of those were quite significant. We had to consolidate the many retail uses due to eliminations in those from the IT trip generation. And one big ask from the different staff was to make sure we looked at daycare rates to ensure that we were charging something that made sense. Next slide, please. And I'm going to turn it over to Kendra to go over this one.
Thank you. A big change that we made within this impact fee program was to update to the ITE 10th edition manual. So ITE 10th edition was kind of adopted by the Institute of Transportation Engineers in September 2017. And your previous impact fee program was based on ITE 8th edition. So that was kind of the latest and greatest that was available the last time you updated your impact fee program. This is now the latest and greatest guide that's available in this update. And I'd say the 10th edition update was not run of the mill. They really took some time to really clean up the data. They removed studies that were conducted pre-1980. So old ITE manual had some very kind of outdated studies, and given all the changes we've seen in our travel environment, I think we'd all agree that we should definitely be using kind of more recent studies. They also removed some land uses that just didn't have a lot of data points. So what you can see on the screen is kind of the outcome of those updates. And for uses that you see on the screen that are highlighted in red, those are uses where the trip rates actually went down during the PM peak hour for the newer, with the newer data. And for those uses on the screen that have their numbers in green there, those are uses that the rates went up with the more updated data. Back to you, April.
Perfect. Next slide, please. So one of the conversions that we did was going from vehicle to person trips. It was done by using a trip ratio. So going from vehicle to persons for a residential and hotel would mean applying that 1.45, and then so on for each of the below land uses. Next slide, please. So looking at the different reductions, the two that we are looking at that make sense are downtown with a slight expansion, acknowledging the development that is going on Meeker and that association of being more transit and pedestrian oriented. Those land uses and zoning districts were added to the boundary for downtown for a reduction. For Midway, we use the boundary from the Midway sub-area plan. And a note, it is only for kind of pedestrian and bicyclist oriented. So it excludes those auto-oriented things that usually are the cars that we're going to, and it excludes industrial land uses. Next slide, please. And I'm going to turn this to Kendra. Sorry.
Thank you. So April shared that we've definitely recommended some reductions in the downtown and the Midway sub-areas. And that's just predicated on the concept that those areas are more transit rich, particularly in the Midway area with the coming of the Federal Way Link extension. They also include just land use environments that are more conducive to walking and biking. So when we looked at the travel data that we collected for those areas compared to the rest of Kent, we actually saw that travel behavior that occurred within the downtown and the Midway sub-areas, by and large, was less impactful on the transportation environment. And the way that we substantiated that is that the mode shares of trips were by and large more slanted towards walking and biking and transit than driving. And those uses, and this is the kind of image that you can see on the screen, tend to take less space within your environment. And so they tend to lead to less traffic congestion. And that's how we were able to substantiate the 11% reduction in the Midway sub-area and the 8% reduction for land uses in the downtown sub-area. Back to you.
Next slide, please. So looking at the industrial uses, similar to what was described by Kendra, this is really reflective of the space that a truck takes up on our transportation network. And so these adjustments go in the other direction. Next slide, please. So next up, I want to go over the different scenarios that we looked at and then compare them to our neighbors. One big note on maximum. So the maximum transportation impact fee is the maximum that we can charge based on our rate study. We do not have to charge this percent. We do not have to charge the full maximum rate. Next slide, please. I apologize for the number of information. I wanted to make sure I was sharing this in a way that was useful. So I put it all together so it can be compared. So I've included all of the neighbors as well as the 2021 rate, the citywide rate, the maximum rate, 55% scenario, and the 65. Staff are recommending the 55% scenario to move forward. So looking at the single family, the 2-3 multifamily, senior housing, and mobile home park. If you look at the 55% max, we are in line with our neighbors. And one of the biggest reasons we're recommending the 55% is one of the goals is this rate study to reflect our 20-year program of projects that we just adopted. And so looking forward and including that, what made the most sense is to kind of peg the percent that kept the single family the same. So if you look at the 55% maximum rate and Kent's 2021 rate, they are very similar. Because of changes to the ITE, some of our 2021 rates compared to the proposed at the 55% are either above or decreased, and that's mainly due to that as well as the methodology. Next slide, please. Looking at hotel motel, again, if you look at our rates at the 55%, this one is very comparable to our neighbors. We are a little bit on the low end, and part of that has to do with that ITE trip generation. Next slide, please. For auto and retail services, one interesting thing about this, the spread starts to get a lot bigger between when you compare our neighbors. Some are on the higher end and some are on the lower end for these land uses. One important thing to note when thinking through rate studies is every single city has a different methodology that goes through, and the methodology is extremely reflective of their city size, as well as the types of developments that are coming in. Next slide, please. Looking at recreation and restaurants and looking at that 55%, the spread is also very large on this one when comparing our neighbors, and at the 55% of the maximum, we are comparable to our neighbors, although there is a much bigger spread when looking at the averages. Next slide, please. For education, these are very similar as well. Looking at the 55%, for elementary school, it is a little bit higher at our 55% max. One note, something I should have said earlier, not every municipality has the same land uses. So X's denote they don't have a rate for that land use for me to compare to. Next slide, please. For institutions, you look at the different ones. One that I want to flag for you is that daycare. And I'm actually going to have Kendra explain the daycare and the explanation of our maximum rate and the 55% rate.
Great, thank you, April. So daycare centers, again, April mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, that was a big focus for city staff to make sure that we had right-sized that rate. We have been working with a number of communities around the Puget Sound and Western Washington on developing their impact fee program. Something we know about daycares is that parents aren't driving out of their way to generally bring kids to centers that are far from where they work or where they live. They generally are trying to be very efficient about that trip. So we have been working with communities to identify reductions for daycare centers. And we've been seeing that in the 80 to 90% rate, because most trips for daycares are not an individual trip. It is paired with that work trip. So that travel is already occurring on the system. The daycare in and of itself is generally not generating travel. So that's why we're able to realize such a rate reduction for daycare land uses in this update. Thanks. Your turn, April.
Perfect. And next up is retail services. There is a couple on here where we are the higher number at the 55% rate. Again, this is mainly due to the ITE trip generation change, as well as some methodology changes. And last up, as a continuation of that retail services, this is less than we currently have. But again, if you look on this one, some of our rates are on the higher end when compared to our neighbors. That is reflective of those changes. Not all municipalities on this list have updated to that 10th edition, which explains some of the differences. Additionally, I anticipate Federal Way is the last one. They just adopted theirs in December, and so they are the closest one, the most recent one. Next slide, please. For office industrial, one big thing on this one, the IT trip generation change really did impact the amount, which is part of the reason we explored and decided to implement looking at the increase based on the amount of space that trucks took. And so looking at that 55% max, we are comparable to our neighbors in all of these categories. Next slide, please. And then I will take any questions. I know that was a lot of information. I struggled to figure out how to get everything on one slide that was relevant without flipping between slides.
Thank you, April. So just looking at the information in the past, did I read it right that we typically chose 30% of the max?
We did choose 30%. And part of that is it was a different number. So the amount of money, that $98 million I referenced, that is extremely specific for the project list. The project list's cost in our last rate study was nearly triple. So charging 30%, it doesn't equate on the percent. There's not a comparison.
Okay, so you're looking at 55 or 65 and you're looking for input from us, is that correct?
That is correct. And the staff recommendation was 55% in order to kind of hold the line at comparable for that single family.
Okay, perfect. So any feedback for April, questions or any feedback on if you have a preference so we can give her some direction? So April, I'm okay with going with the 55%. You know, when you look at it, those numbers put us very comparable to everyone else or even under that when you look at the information that you sent us. I'm just wondering from my council members, are you looking at the recommendation that staff has as far as 55% as well? I just want to know where to tell April to go forward on this. All right, so 55%, are we okay with moving forward? Okay, so I'm seeing some heads nod as far as your recommendation, April, so does that help you?
That helps a bunch, and you'll be seeing me again in 2 weeks for an action to move it forward. Thank you so much. I appreciate your assistance.
Thank you.
There's Sandra.
I'm sorry, Sandra, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Council President. I was just wondering why we need to see this again. I mean, I like hearing from you, April.
No worries. So it's going to be coming to you for an action in the very first committee of the whole meeting. This was just to make sure that we were going in the right direction and kind of get your head nod before we finalized to come in front of you again.
Yeah, so I have March 9th. We will see it again at Committee of the Whole and then move it on to Council for March 16th. Councilmember Larmer.
Will it be a significantly different presentation or do we have to go through the full presentation again?
No, I'm going to cut it down from here. I wanted to give you some context since there had been 2 weeks, but there was I had not given all of the scenarios at the last time. So I wanted to give you the context. Going forward, it will be a much shorter presentation.
Okay, thank you.
April, if there's consensus, is there any problem with moving it forward based on your recommendations, moving it forward to consent at this point? Or do we need to have it come back to us on March 9th?
I'm not sure. I would need to defer to legal on that one. I don't know the required process on that piece.
Okay.
It is already had the public hearing and it was unanimously approved.
All right, Derek, do you have any feedback on that or should we just keep it the way that it is?
The practice of going from committee of the whole to council is a city council internal practice. If you want that to go direct to consent on March 16th, you could do that. And if we go back and find out that there's a procedural step we missed that way, we can always let you know and put it back on committee of the whole for March 9th.
Okay, so basically the information that we saw at the 55%, that wouldn't change. That just gives you April direction to bring it back to us so then we can take it to consent again. I'm just trying to see if we can eliminate one step in this process, because I think we all agree that with the 55%, we would be okay with moving it to consent. And I'm seeing heads nod from some of my colleagues, so lots of them. Okay, so April, if you don't mind, if there's no significant changes, if we make sure that this is okay, we can move this to the consent calendar.
Perfect. And one note on that, it could go on either of the March. It just can't go before the TMP, but you can go at the same time.
Okay, we'll get some clarification on that, but we'll go ahead and move that forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. That brings us to the last item of our presentations today, which is the snow and ice response. Looking forward to hearing about this.
Yes. Good evening, Council President, Council members, Madam Mayor. I'm Bill Thomas. I'm the manager of Streets and Vegetation, and I was the overseer to the response for this event. I appreciated getting an audience at the last minute. I know it's been a long evening. Feel free to ask me any questions at any time. So I'll try to move through this as quickly as I can. Next slide, please. Okay. December 15th of last year, I presented to council on our snow and ice response plan, hoping we wouldn't have to use it. However, we were able to implement it as planned when we needed it. So part of our planning was for the week following up to the event. We had last second training for our newer staff. This coincided with some early summer training on our new equipment last summer. We had to have some refreshers going on during this week when we actually loaded the plows and the sanders. Part of that was communications. We got weather updates. We were reviewing the severe weather as it was progressing throughout the week in the other areas. We even had Q13 News down and interviewed our operations manager to see how we were prepared for the oncoming snow fight. We contacted multimedia to take some photos and install a few GoPros on our equipment. So we do have some updated photos as well as motion pictures of us plowing going down the streets. The DLC staff got the DLC all ready to open it up. Our signs group pre-deployed signs and message boards. We moved our loading equipment up to the east and west hills, and we had to arrange 28 truck operators, 12 of which of those operators are good truck drivers, but they've never performed snow and ice removal. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. There we go. So part of our weather preparedness is the webinars that we receive daily from the National Weather Service, NOAA, and also through our subscribed daily weather reports for the Kent area in specific. I know the snowfall predictions varied throughout that week. We planned for 4 to 6 inches, pretty significant for our area at any time. Some of the reports we got after the event was we actually accumulated 10 to 12 inches of snow. Next slide, please. The equipment for this event are 12 plows with sanders. This is 6 additional trucks added to our fleet since our last response. We had 2 de-icer trucks with plows. We added 1 additional tank onto one of those trucks for additional de-icing. We also had 3 vehicles to perform road closures during the event. Next slide, please. So all our fuel storage tanks were filled the day before. Availability afterwards was unknown, so we wanted to make sure we topped off all our tanks. So with this new system that we have, we doubled our capacity for diesel storage. Next slide. So last spring and summer, we erected 2 salt domes, as you see in this photo. 400 tons total, 200 on the west hill, 200 on the east hill. We're fully stocked and ready for this event. In the past, I want to emphasize, in the past, you see the bag of salt there. We used bags of salt loaded on pallets, and we used about 10 to 25 bags per truck, or until we got tired. So in essence, it equated to about a 1% mix of salt and sand. This event, we were able to use our bulk salt, and we actually used a 50% salt, 50% sand. And that made a big difference in the results from the past events into this last event. Next slide, please. Part of our preparation is what do we do prepare for this weather event? We load all sanders and plows a day or two before the event arrives. And that's when our training kicks in as well. We're able to maneuver those vehicles around some streets without having to get into the snow and ice yet, so we can get comfortable with the plows. We deploy and stage all our signs and message boards at the usual locations. We equip all our trucks with chains and install them in the yard when the snow accumulations are imminent. Next slide, please. So here we see a guy that's putting chains on our big trucks. It's easier to do it in the yard rather than doing it out on the shoulder of the road after we've gotten lost in traction. So it's a lot easier here. Next slide, please. Our sign pre-deployment. We pre-stage our signs and message boards based on the usual road closure locations. These locations are prone to compact snow and ice and take a lot of resources to try to keep them open. So our regular commuters and residents know that these areas are most likely to be shut down, and they have their own routes they take. Next slide. So the day of the event, we moved our trucks to both East and West Hills to our loading areas and filled each truck for their readiness. Next slide. So a lot of planning went into this event. Oh, do we have any more? Uh-oh, there it is. Uh-oh, we lost all the slides. Maybe not. Well, then I'm just going to go ahead and run through this as we go. So a lot of planning went into this event because of the predictability of the storm. This allowed us to set up the DOC in a timely fashion, get all our communications up and running, identify staff to operate the DOC, identify all operators and aides. Due to the COVID protocols, we changed our approach to manage our DOC. Usually we had 4 to 5 personnel in the past. Now we have 2 DOC members and 1 admin person working from home. And that admin person handled all the phone calls and the C-click fixes as well. So with all this information, Friday morning, we delayed opening our DOC because of the weather held off just a little bit longer than we thought. DOC officially opened at 4 p.m. Friday evening. The snow started to fall around 6 p.m. The trucks were loaded and deployed to the surface streets as the snow fell. It continued to fall, and by midnight, we had accumulations around 3 to 4 inches. Heavier snow fell later on before sunrise. So part of our public outreach was communications with the EOC and communications via Drive Kent. Severe weather updates were sent out 4 times per the day, to our internal staff. And this goes out to all public works staff, communications, PD command and PIO, PD records, and emergency management OEM. Drive Kent went out to all subscribers via email and available to the public as closures also posted on the map. Traffic alerts go out as needed. There was a significant decrease in alerts during this event versus prior snow events. We only had 6 road closures that began and then opening them up right away. As compared to the 2019 storm, we had 9 closures and took almost 2 days to open those roads. Okay, weekend, see click fix, we had 8 requests we received during the event, and only 3 were related to this event. 2 were fencing issues, and 1 was a request to plow. Weekend event, this was a weekend event, so calls were very light. Only 1 left, and on a voicemail was a complaint that we had not reported of all the road conditions, just the road closures themselves. We also had a few calls from the PD to plowed sand. They were very light in comparison to the past events. Next slide, please. So social media, that was a big part of our communication involvement. Twitter, Facebook, our website. Compared to the past season, our social media feedback was overwhelmingly positive in comparison to the past years that we had. Next slide. This is our AVL automatic. It's automatic vehicle location in real time location of our vehicles. In the first initial onset with the extra trucks, we were able to hit our primary roads right away. And we get 2 trucks on Canyon Drive, 2 trucks on 208. We're able to hit 2 trucks on all these roads at the same time, where in past events we weren't able to. That's due to the additional equipment we received. This allowed us to move out faster to the secondary roads and even the third priority roads. This is a map, reflects a full 24-hour slot and a snapshot of all our trucks. And you can see on here that we actually hit all these roads within the first 24 hours, which is excellent news for us. So we used about 2,250 gallons of diesel. It takes fuel to run these trucks. Okay, it figured out to about 1,000 gallons per day. So the city was strategic in its improvements. Just replaced our fuel islands and also our de-icing tanks. We added more capacity to that as well. This last year, we updated our obsolete, non-compliant fuel system to a state-of-the-art fueling center. And our equipment used, as I said up above, there are 2,200 gallons of fuel. We have 4 above-ground tanks now that were installed. There are 24,000 gallons capacity for unleaded fuel and 8,000 gallons of diesel. That's twice as much diesel that we had available to us last year. Next slide. We had 303 tons of salt that was used. This photograph shows that we had about 15 ton left. By the time this event was over, that 15 ton was gone. We had an empty East Hill Bay there. However, we did have 100 tons left over on the West Hill. So we are looking at into doubling our capacity at the East Hill location due to the more roads that are up there on the East Hill that need to be covered. So we're also looking at better utilization of our salt usage to see if there could be some efficiencies made there as well. So in comparison, we use 300 tons of sand. Okay, that's 310 tons of sand, about a third of what we normally use for this side of an event, for this size of event. The less sand we put out means less sand to clean up and less sand that enters into our drainage system. And it makes less work for our drainage crew as well. So part of that, we used 1,800 gallons of de-icer. This was mainly applied before the event started. We were able to deploy this de-icing unit on the roads before the event because it didn't rain before this event. It was actually quite dry when the snow started falling. So the anti-ice application actually created a barrier to not allow the snow and ice to bond to the pavement below. So as I said earlier, we doubled our capacity for storage of liquid de-icing material from 6,000 gallons to 13,000 gallons, 500. With the addition of another tank. Okay, so this is the inside of our new truck with the new equipment that we have in here. As you can see, it's quite the display. You know, anything from the regular truck instruments to the new instruments for the to operate the sanders and plows. That screen that you see right there, we can actually meter our amounts of sand and salt that we apply, as well as our pre-wetting de-icer tank. We can actually run it up higher if we need higher, or lower if we need lower. But in addition to that, if you look on the left there, you'll see the photos on the side. Our truck drivers have to be aware of everything around them, everything from the center islands to non-motorized people on the sides of the roads as well. So we have to be very cognizant of not only our gauges, but what's around them as well. So they did a remarkable job. So last slide here. Overall cost for this event was just over $95,000. Okay, this was a 2-day event, and that's 900 work hours, almost 900 work hours. Okay, all of it was overtime. It was a flex Friday for our crews, the Teamster crews, and then we had the weekend. Okay, first time this was a first time event for many of these drivers, as I stated before. Interdepartmental assistance was with the admin group, our water, storm, sewer, fleet, parks, mayor's communications team, and last but not least, our police force out there as well. We all work together, and you know, it went from a street response last year to a operations and citywide response. So it was many kudos to many people that made this operation a success. Some of our after action items, we had minor repairs that were needed to our vehicles. As you can see, it's just, there's a lot of obstacles out there, and this is a weird snowstorm. We had drifts in the road that I haven't seen before in this area. We did a lot of cleaning our vehicles, and we were restocking our supplies. Sand cleanup is going to be minimal this year, and that's due to not using it and using other materials in its place. So what made the difference during this event? We had more staff, more trucks, different materials. We doubled our capacity of our liquid calcium chloride and the use of bulk salt. Before, we were limited in having used to buy pallets of salt and to use the bags. The salt accelerates the melting. This event was a dry event. While the wet snow changes to ice, it changes the ice much more quickly, okay? So it wasn't a very wet event. It was more a dry event. So our citywide COVID protocols helped as well. We were able to do remote meetings, pre-event as well as during the event, weekend, so more people stayed at home. I'd like to give a special courtesy to Andy Martin from the Parks Department. He helped us out, was driving one of our more complicated vehicles. And Alex Klinger chipped in with the photos and the GoPro footage. We would not have been as successful without the mayor's and the council's backing on purchasing this equipment and the fueling station upgrades and the material storage. So with that, I, on behalf of everybody on our crew, want to give you guys a big thank you. And I'm willing to take any questions. I know I went on and on and on and on, but I figured you guys want to know. So.
Well, Bill, thank you so much to you and your crew. Make sure the entire department knows how much we appreciate everything that was done. I don't know that I've ever noticed James opening up so quickly during a snow event, and it was pretty amazing Friday afternoon when I was out and about to see someone taking down the barricades and the cones. Pretty awesome to have you guys out there making sure that we are all getting around safely. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I am going to turn to my colleagues, starting with Councilmember Thomas, followed by Larmer, and then Fincher.
Thank you, Council President. Bill, I got to tell you, outstanding. It's the only word I can think of, because I was down having coffee with people, listening to some of the conversations around the room. No one was complaining this year at all. It was really amazing. They were all just so grateful for the city of Kent, and that's your crew. And I got to tell you, it was amazing. The one thing you did mention was the drifts. a lot of wind this year. It was amazing the amount of drifts that were piling up around the area. So once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember Thomas. Councilmember Larmer. You're on mute. Sorry.
Sorry, I started having problems right then. Bill, what I was saying is that I think if we were in chambers right now, I know at least I would be standing up applauding you, because you and your team deserve a standing ovation for this response this year. I have a 4-wheel drive, so I ended up kind of being the volunteer to take neighbors out. And so I took a neighbor out to the grocery store on, it was Saturday morning, first thing early in the morning. And first thing I see as I turn onto 208 is one of the trucks out there. And it made me so happy. I made my neighbor take a picture. And then I'd say within a few hours, I started getting texts from friends and neighbors saying, "Vincent's clear this year. Thank you." So excellent job. I really, really appreciate everybody who was out there and all the work your crew did. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything to pass on? I think we're all very grateful for your crew. And hopefully that will be the only time this year that we have to worry about this weather. So
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us.
All right.
And that brings us to the end of a very long agenda this evening. So thank you to everyone that stuck around. Thank you to all my colleagues for this great conversation. Go out and enjoy the rest of your evening, and have a good night. We are adjourned.
And the council members, my name is Roberto Arellano, Robert, fine. Just a little bit about myself here. I'm actually a recent transfer to Kent, but I lived up in Renton, just up a few minutes. I've only been